debate review. Let's get it. What's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city. Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? As always, we got to check into the party people in the chat. We got Asar. We got Bodega Lady D New. We got CMB, the ambassador. We got the incomparable, the indelible Nate2D2. We got Mr. Green. We got Ty Hammer. Man, this is good. Please make sure that you go tell a friend to tell a friend that it's him again. If you haven't, like, share, subscribe. Also, if you want to show love to your boy, you can support him in PayPal. If you want to show love on a monthly basis, you can hit me on the Patreon, where you get an assortment of tasty goodies and pastries that you'll really appreciate. And with that being said, let me introduce you to my very illustrious panel, starting with one of the co-defendants of the case, MJ Jackson. What's going on, sir?
Oh, what's up, y'all? Good. I'm not at home, as some of you can tell. I am on the East Coast, which is also why I had to wear this hat.
My boo this man.
To let these East Coasters know what time it is.
Boo this man.
But no, happy to be chopping it up with this panel of heavyweights. So hey, man, let's get it in. I didn't know that the brother who we're going to be addressing had so much built in over 2 years. So we're here to help him release.
We'll get to that. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. So, not in the same way his God did, though.
Jeez. Starting early. And then next to him, we have Captain Kevin Benton Jr. What's going on, sir?
What's up, everybody? I'm grateful to be here. Really enjoyed the debate with Adam, Vocab, and Jabari Sarnetter. So grateful to be on the panel tonight to be able to discuss it.
Yes. Yeah, MJ chooses violence even when he's out of town. That's facts. These are facts. And of course, next to him is the second half of the EPMD of urban apologetics, one Rex, the other destroyers. We're talking about Mr. True ID himself, Adam Coleman. What's going on, sir?
Hey, what's going on, man? You know what it is, bro. So I guess I'm like the co-defendant. You know what I'm saying? Like, man, glad to be here, man. It was pretty dope, being on side the other day. We'll get into all that, but we're gonna chop it up. We're gonna chop it up, keep it spicy.
Yes, sir. And then of course we have the real American, Mr. Phil Fox. What's going on, sir?
Did Adam Coleman just call himself the Coco offendant? What's up, fam? Love y'all. Just glad to be here. I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm here.
We're just happy. We're happy that you're here, brother. We're happy that you're here. And then next to him, of course, is everybody's favorite Edomite, the scourge of Israel, the trouble of all 12 tribes. Vocab below.
I was just hoping instead of EPMD, we could be someone with a little bit of skill, like DAS Effects, maybe.
Oh, come on, bro. Here we go, man. This dude. The blasphemy, bro. Get out of here, man. Yo, mute this guy, man.
It's funny. So we are gathered here today to give our thoughts, comments about a very interesting discussion that occurred sometime last week. It was on Sarnetter's channel, and it was Vocab, Adam Coleman, and with Jabari and Sarnetter. So if you guys, Adam and Vocab, can you tell us actually how, the backstory behind this particular discussion?
Well, I guess I should start. So,
you, bro.
Yeah, Sarnetter calls me, and whenever he calls me, I never know if I'm like live on the air or what's happening, right? Right. So he calls me. He's like, "Hey, brother, I got your arch nemesis on the line." I'm like, arch nemesis? I was like, Captain Tazariak, because that's who he always pairs me with, right? Is Cap, right? That's what he says. He's like, no, Jabari. I was like, oh, I got another arch enemy. Okay. And then Jabari says something about I've been running from him for 2 years. I'm like, well, man, the past 2 years, I don't think I've been running much at all. But thanks for the compliment. So I'm like trying to figure out what's going on, right? Because I legitimately don't know what he's talking about. I've talked to him once in person and I think once in a live chat. And it was always cool. Like we just never kind of caught up. But I guess he was talking about this live stream we did that was myself and MJ on Kemet, where we called it a strange new religion. And I stand by that subtitle. No one else has to stand by it because I picked it. But I do call Kemet a strange new religion, right? And so I said, okay. And they're like, how about tonight? I'm like, just give me a couple days. Just a couple days. And when I hung up, I realized this discussion is only going to be so interesting. It needs to have somebody else, somebody basically who I feel is going to bring to the table more to Kemet than I can bring, because I feel like it'll be a much more well-rounded discussion. And so, Adam Coleman. That's how it went down. So I don't know if you want to pick up the story from there, brother.
Well, yeah, I had to unmute myself. My bad. Yeah, actually, when he first called, man, I was at the grocery store, so I didn't even pick up at first. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I was trying to do what I was doing. Picking diapers. See, people think that we don't have like real lives as apologists. You know what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? So the idea that I'm Vocab is calling me about this super important dialogue, and I'm buying diapers. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just sitting here chilling. But actually, when I saw MJ call and then Alfredo called, I'm like, oh snap! Did somebody like die or something? I'm like, man, I'm getting these calls back to back. I'm like, I don't know what's going on at that point. You know what I mean? But yeah, I finally hit Vocab back. He's like, yo, man, I'm setting up this dialogue with Jabari on Sidnetter. Like, you trying to come on? I'm like, absolutely. Like when? Like we rocking like tomorrow? What we trying to do? You mean? I was out of town at the time, so he was like, yo, we're gonna try to do it Tuesday. So I'm like, yo, absolutely. Let me know. That's definitely was good. And it's like Vocab was saying, I mean, he does a lot of stuff with apologetics in general. But I mean, I've been spending a little time on Kemet. I mean, I've kind of been thinking through these things, so I did feel like I could bring something to the table that would add to the conversation. And personally, to be honest, I think what sold me on it is it was built to be like a dialogue about different worldviews, like, why is he a Kemetic? Why are we Christian? And those are the conversations that I really enjoy. I really like conversations where it's not just trying to one up each other, but really we're just really mixing it up in terms of, why do you believe what you believe? And, as we'll see in a minute, we'll talk about later, I guess. I've never seen, Jabari or some of these other dudes defend their worldview. 90% of the time they're taking jabs at Christianity or the Hebrews or whatever, and they don't get around to putting on the table what their worldview is and why they subscribe to it. So I felt like this was an opportunity, given that it was kind of like a dialogue format and that was the general topic. I thought this was an opportunity to really bring that out. Like, let's hear the argumentation and the evidence. So I was all about it, man.
But the initial pitch to you was you're going to speak about why you believe in the Christian worldview, and he was supposed to talk about the Kemetic worldview. That was what you understood it.
Yeah, that was my understanding. Okay. That he was supposed to talk about Kemet. Basically, why are you a Kemetic? What is Kemeticism rather, and why are you a Kemetic? And then we were going to be given from our biblical worldview why you're a Christian. That was my understanding of what the topic was supposed to be.
Yeah, that is what they said, because they seemed to want to talk, but there wasn't a specific thing. And I was like, well, this short of notice, I don't think we should be setting up a straight up debate. I was like, but what if we had this dialogue discussion? Why I'm a Christian, why I'm not a Christian, why I'm Kemetic, why I'm not Kemetic. And they said, okay, that sounds good. And so that was what it's supposed to be.
We didn't get that conversation.
It wasn't exactly that.
Jabari said he'll describe the Kemetic worldview for you. But y'all were pressing him to defend the Kemetic worldview.
And you know what? There really is a method to the madness. Like, so here's a little tidbit. So when it comes to like these public dialogues or debates, right? You don't want to lose the battle, so to speak, at the outset by picking a topic where only the Christian is under fire. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, so this is just for, all of us as a community of apologists. If you find yourself in a situation where you have some sort of formal debate, dialogue, whatever, we don't always want to be the ones, painted in a corner. I think we do that far too often. We need to make sure that, those who we're dialoguing with are sharing the load, so to speak, and defending their worldview. Because, at the end of the day, we're not the only ones making truth claims here.
Right.
And so I really wanted to show that, in the debate, and to be completely honest, if I'm just throwing on my cards here, at the end of the day, I'm not scared of none of these dudes, in election speaking. And so I want them to know that, and I want the believers out there to know that we don't have to be afraid of these various different worldviews, because at the end of the day, I believe that what we're putting on the table is true, and we have good reason to affirm that it's true. Mm-hmm. And I want all apologists, just casual believers, whatever, we need to know that. And so I think conversations like those are important to say, we're not intimidated whatsoever. You know what I'm saying?
Adam said, I'm on here because I got bars.
You stole my line, MJ.
That was great.
I was about to say that.
Great quote.
Right.
But the only reason why he was there.
Before we get to you, I want Kevin and Phil Fox, guys who were, watching the live stream, if you can just quickly give us your initial thoughts about the dialogue that occurred that day.
Hey, Phil, you want to go first, man?
Go ahead, Cap.
Well, I was inspired beyond words. I happened to get, conversations with Adam and Vocab and stuff in the past, but watching it, and I actually watched all, 3.5, plus hours and everything. And I called Adam afterwards to just tell him, like, man, I was just inspired beyond words. It's one thing to know that the truth is on your side. It's another thing to see somebody be able to articulately and competently defend the faith, and then also have knowledge of, of someone else's worldview. So having read Kukul's book, Tactics and different things, again, it's another thing to read about those things and to hear about it, but to see apologetics being done in action with someone, senior in another camp. Even as an apologist and as a Christian, it inspired me beyond words and made me want to learn more, want to go harder. It inspired me as a Christian. So seeing, brothers who I, believe are champions in the faith, and everything like that, doing that in a live setting, it should inspire all of us, hopefully, to get to that level of knowledge. And then here's the thing, Vocab, I want to thank you, man, because it's one thing you could have just said, no, I'll go on there and just talk about what I know. I'll get the views, I'll get the, the limelight and everything. But when you're not concerned about the limelight being on you, but about it being on Jesus and about it being on the kingdom, you're not afraid to call up someone else and say, hey, I could utilize a little help with this. You're a little bit more knowledgeable than me. So shout out to you for the humility that you displayed in showing that this isn't about competition within the urban apologetics community. It's about collaboration. None of us are here trying to gain shine on ourselves. We're all deflecting that attention off of us onto Jesus Christ. So even in that, I learned something even in just watching that. So shout out. I really enjoyed the entire thing. So that's my thoughts.
I want to piggyback on that. I'm glad you said that, Kevin, because I want to publicly say thank you to Vocab Malone, because it wasn't just that one live stream, but, several times over the last, couple of years, he's looked out for me and others in terms of creating opportunities, hooking people up, with opportunities to preach the gospel, use their gifts, whether it be the Cyber City, conference and various other things, man. So I want to publicly say this is just what Vocab does, man. He really makes a way for other people. So
he puts targets on people's backs. That's Vocab.
Right.
That's true too.
Like, not just me. We're all going to go.
Right.
The real motive.
It's bigger than Nino Brown.
He didn't have to do that, man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
But that's a form of discipleship too. Even when we've had our own little group chats and sessions and stuff where they do training on how to do a better live broadcast and different things. You can have all the passion in the world, but you still need to have some skill. And so to get advice from people like, from like you, Vocab, and just different things, and just having that willingness to take out your time to help inspire and teach the next generation of up and coming people, or even this generation of up and coming people, it's just been a blessing for me just to be able to connect with all of you all. And I don't think I've met anybody here in person other than Adam. But I have relationships with all of you, and everything. And I'm grateful for that. I think it's just amazing.
Amen. Thank you so much, bro. That's good stuff. Good stuff. Mr. Phil Fox.
Yeah. I mean,
quick thoughts.
Yeah. Quick thoughts. One of the biggest things was it was cool to see guys from two different theological thought come together, where you could see where they were trying to use it to their advantage, but the fact that they were united in Christ was amazing to me to watch, because instead of it being a point where they could really get their hooks in, both Adam and Vocab were both willing to sort of concede to one another, and essentially it sort of, you know, it didn't become a thing. So it was masterful how it was done, as far as them working together, even when their theological framework could have caused a stumbling block between the two of them. No, it actually sort of bolstered their arguments and stuff. So it was amazing to me to see. And like I said, I look up to both these guys. So it was just amazing to see how two grandmasters going to work, man.
All right, so before this becomes a bromance par excellence, let's get to what we're getting to here.
I love you guys. I just love you guys.
Hey, guys.
So
this okay.
So what we're gonna do, right?
The slides.
We got the slides. So instead of,
The slide
we got a lot
master.
of people here, we got a lot of things to say. So instead of showing the video clips, I have the transcript with the timestamps. So if you want, you could, you know, when you finish, you can pause it, you can see it for yourself. So this is basically how it starts, right? So this is Jabari, and he's like, Vocab had a discussion with MJ Jackson, who I think is an assistant pastor and founded the Urban Christian Institute. And I was really a little frustrated. I'll even show you some of the discussions we had in the chat. Actually, I didn't change none of the words, so this is how the transcript looks like. So I did that on purpose. I left it alone. I didn't want anybody to think that I was fudging the transcript. Anyway, I was a little frustrated because the show that he did in January of 2019 was Kemet, What Christians Need to Know About a Strange New Religion. What Christians need to know about a strange new religion. And then, not only is the title extremely problematic, not only is the title that kind of title that, you know, that would irk and draw the ire of many people, whether then the competition or not, but in addition to, he didn't even have a person in the Kemetic tradition to talk about it. And so I was upset, frustrated. I thought that it was unfair. I thought that it was a little bizarre to me. And so I told them that in the chat, right, we had some conversations back and forth. It seemed pretty clear that they did not want for me to come back on to talk about the Christian tradition. So this is the video in question here. This is the thumbnail, Kemet, What Christians Need to Know. And as Jabari says, this was streamed live on January 17th, 2019. So MJ, were you surprised to hear that you're basically the reason why this discussion actually even occurred?
No, I wasn't surprised. I was like, you know how The Rock said, "Finally, The Rock." You know, it was one of them things where, I mean, I knew he was still hot about that, but to say something all the way till now, why else would he be mad with Vocab? Come on now, why else would Jabari be mad with Vocab? He got into the chat the next day. Him and his wife got into the not the chat, but the comment sections. And so, you know, I mean, what I was doing was giving an introductory to Kemet, you know, a popular introduction on how and why it has become so popular and how it is used to beat Christians over the head. And what I used sources that Jabari has defended against accusations from Garfield that the sources are trash, and Jabari has defended these same sources against Garfield. But to turn around and cast doubt on the sources that he's defended when Vocab brought it up is just, it's disingenuous and just in bad faith. So, you know.
So yeah, I thought it was funny. I'm like, MJ, like, how did MJ get involved in this? Like, that's just it's crazy. But
wherever there's grenades being thrown or shenanigans, somehow MJ's in the mix. That's what we found out.
But I have to
MJ's in there somewhere.
I did find it strange that, again, this was 2019. You saw he was frustrated. He thought it was unfair. He was upset, right?
Bizarre.
It was bizarre. He had a lot of feelings against what you got. He took great umbrage against this. Why did he wait 2 years?
He told us in the comment section that he was thinking about doing a response video. And me, for at least 6 or 7 months, I was looking for it. When it came time to start getting ready for the Cyber City apologetics conference, I said, okay, let me put this together. So maybe he'll give me a response. I think that presentation was way more devastating than what I did initially, because I brought out even more sources from his camp. Still no response. Still,
it wasn't like you and Vocab did the video, then you guys ran and hit the cover for 2 years, and then, you know what I mean? It's like, I personally find it odd that listen. I guess people, you can forget why you get upset about things, and then maybe someone reminds you later on, hey, maybe it was one of those things. I'll try to be a little charitable here, but I don't know. It just, to me personally, it does seem a bit strange.
I remember at the time, I think it's interesting. I was kind of shocked that he was aware of the live stream in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Because typically, at that time at least, Vocab, was mostly doing stuff with the Hebrew Israelites, and so I was actually just surprised that he even got wind of the video. But I remember when Vocab hit me up and was like, yo, or actually I think it was MJ might have hit me up and was like, yo, we got your boy brother Jabari here in the chat. I was like, oh, cool. Let me hop in there, as well. Because, interestingly enough, in the dialogue we had this past week, the main argument that I, that threw at Jabari, the first time I tested that argument out was, in that chat section of that video. You know what I'm saying? I had already developed it. If people go back and listen to, like, when I was doing the podcast, which I actually am bringing back as of this week, but when I was just doing the straight audio podcast, I had an episode called God versus the Wu-Tang Clan. And in that video, or in that podcast rather, I did like a longer version of the argument that I tried on Jabari. And I recorded that way before, MJ's video and Vocab's video where they were, critiquing Kemet with the new strange religion thing. So I had developed this argument. And the first time I actually tried it out was against Jabari and his wife in that chat section. You know what I'm saying? And I guess he probably just forgot about it. You know what I'm saying? But, came back to bite him.
And then, of course, he went straight for the jugular with Vocab. And at the 10-minute mark, he says, but I do think that it is also extremely rich for someone who is of European descent to question the validity of Africans deciding their own traditions. And so once again, you don't get to destroy our house and then say that someone is homeless. You just don't get to do that. This is a refrain that he used constantly throughout.
At least a good 15 times, man.
Right? So what's your take on this, Vocab?
Well, if he follows ancient Kemetic practice, he definitely knows about destroying people's houses. I guess he would know.
Right. No, this is true. Because, specifically, you're talking about what? Iconoclasm, yes?
Yes. And also, what they did to their neighbors to the south, especially. But look, so obviously I've heard that point or argument lots, right? Dozens of times. I didn't think Jabari was going to say it, though. So I don't say I was blindsided, but Jabari didn't mention anything about that in our discussion with Sanetta. He's never spoke to me in that way. Like when we were at the debate with Bantu and Jabari, and I briefly spoke to him afterwards, he was like, it might have been when I asked a question. And he was either there or right after. And he was like, hey, brother, we need to talk. But he seemed kind of congenial about it. Like it would be a good conversation. We could have a conversation. And it just kind of never worked out. I don't know if it's supposed to be public or private, but he was saying we need to talk. And so I thought that was, a good thing. Like, hey. So when he when he said that, I kind of just rolled my eyes like, oh man, it's gonna be like this. And so that's when I partially decided, well, I'm not going to be, the austere, stoic, super chill. I'm going to be a little more rowdy with this because if he's doing that, to me, it's changing the nature of the conversation a little bit. And it's like, oh, okay. But I'm also not going to get too caught up in it. Because maybe he wanted to park there, but I'm not going to park there, So I'm just gonna. Hey, if you want to critique Odinism, that's fine. Now, is there a sense in which I kind of know what he's saying? But here's the thing, guys. Maybe I'm wrong, but what it seems like to me is when people have used that kind of thing, when they use it against somebody, right? I used to be like, well, let me approach this way and do all these caveats and qualifications. And I felt like when I did that in good faith with people, that they're just using it as a tool. They're not really making an argument in good faith. It's kind of something to throw you off, to make you basically apologize before you're even starting. And so I was like, I can't do that. So some people were like, well, Vocab sure is glib about, this thing that Jabari's bringing up. That's because to me, it's not really given in good faith most of the time. And it's a way to divert the discussion. Yep. And I'm not really, to me, that would defeat.
That's not the first time they've done that to you. Yeah. Okay? I remember when we called into Zariak's show. Before you could have any conversation, he wanted you to apologize about something. So.
And I did apologize. And I learned from the way he was during the show and afterwards. I kind of learned. I was like, oh, we're not really dealing in general with good faith actors when it's all about strategy and rhetoric and games playing. A lot of stuff is not on the surface, meaning I like the idea of it being direct. Hey, here's what I'm really saying. Here's what it really is. Okay. Right. But I realized a lot of this there's something else. And once you kind of, see that more and more, it's just like, all right, well, we got to get shout out to Pastor Bennett. I saw he gave he was in the live chat. He's
shout out to Pastor Bennett, man. Respect to Pastor Bennett.
Yeah, he's like the razor sharp, precision assassin guy over there. The sniper, man. He's I know that's Steve News thing, but I'm just saying Bennett, man. He comes in, boom,
from that work.
Yeah.
So me and Adam, we've done, man, I don't know how many videos we did of the Bantu Jabari debate. And unfortunately, he's regurgitating a lot of stuff from the debate. So I'm going to regurgitate some of the stuff that we said about the debate. So here's one real quick. I don't think I actually used this one, but it's Frederick Lewis Norton in his book Voyage de Egypte et de Nubie recorded this image of the Noseless Sphinx in 1738. It was published in 1755, 16 years before Napoleon was born. Because you know how they like to say that Napoleon shot the nose off the Sphinx. Like, no, this already occurred.
Somebody better tell Nas.
Yeah, right. I mean, So this is from Edward Bleiberg, an American archaeologist and Egyptologist. He says, iconoclasm on a grand scale was primarily political in motive. Bleiberg writes in the exhibition catalog Striking Power, the facing statues aided ambitious rulers and would-be rulers with rewriting history to their advantage. Over the centuries, this erasure often occurred along gendered lines. The legacies of two powerful Egyptian queens, whose authority and mystique fueled the cultural imagination, Hatshepsut and Nefertiti, were largely erased from visual culture. Hatshepsut's own nephew and co-king would later erase her figures and texts and reassign credit to his father or grandfather for much of what she had done. This was from When Women Ruled the World, 6 Queens of Egypt from Karakuni. So much for the Black woman being God, right? The ancient Egyptians, is important to note, ascribed important powers to images of the human form. They believed that the essence of a deity could inhabit an image of that deity, or in the case of mere mortals, part of that deceased human being's soul could inhabit a statue inscribed for that particular person. These campaigns of vandalism were therefore intended to deactivate an image's strength, as Bloomberg put it. This is from Karnak, the development of the Temple of Amun-Ra, Elaine Sullivan, UCLA, Encyclopedia of Egyptology. She says, sometime in the 5th regional year, Amenhotep changed his name to Akhenaten and launched a fervent attack on the existence of gods Other than the solar deity Aten, Amun was a special target, and his name and figure were effaced from temples throughout Egypt, including at Karnak. Shortly after, the king decided to leave the city of Thebes and move the center of cult, the royal residence, and his burial site to Middle Egypt, to a city he named Akhenaten, modern-day Tel Amarna. His devotion to religious affairs caused him to neglect growing rebellion in Western Asia. While the Egyptian priesthoods grew increasingly restive at the neglect and suppression of the gods they served, Akhenaten's death was followed by a reaction and the restoration of the traditional pantheon and its worship. Although virtually no trace of the Aten temple at Karnak was left at its site when the temple was dismantled after Akhenaten's death in the 14th century, large-scale reuse of the blocks and subsequent buildings has resulted in recapture of many thousands of them, numerous archaeological repair projects at Karnak. So, it doesn't get more African than to destroy the previous religious framework. This is what you do. So when these ancient Kemetic people got the gospel of Jesus, they did what Africans do. They destroyed the previous religious framework. Yeah. And it also shows you that these African Christians actually preserved African culture. So,
yeah, I mean, facts, and that's exactly, what I brought up when he addressed this in the dialogue. He's showing the same pictures that he showed during the Bantu debate, and which actually what I thought was interesting. I mean, clearly he hasn't just didn't seem that he's advanced in knowledge in this regard since the debate, and he hasn't done any work to fact check himself because he certainly should have known better than to bring up the same arguments. But anyway, one thing I noticed is that when you look at whether it be Jabari or just a lot of these, it's not just Jabari, but they tend to trample upon African agency. You know what I'm saying? Now, what I mean by that is they paint a picture as if, Africans are just kind of along for the ride with Christianity or being duped into it or, being colonized into it, beat into it, whatever. And they really undermine just the free will activities of Africans, throughout church history. And so it's just interesting that they actually trample upon Africans in order to uphold their modern African sensibilities or whatever. But to your point, BK, when you have like Jabari paints a picture as if it was like a mob of white Roman or Greco-Roman Christians storming into Africa at different points and just wrecking shop. When really it's far more likely that in the instances that he's talking about that you have people who are indigenous Coptics, for example, who are converting to Christianity and they're thereby, doing exactly what you said. They're putting their beliefs, they're indicating those in terms of what they're creating in their artwork and so on and so forth on these former Kemetic temples. That's what's going on there. But if let Jabari tell it, it is a bunch of white dudes running around wrecking shop in Africa. I mean, and that's just flat out historically, that's just nonsense. That's complete nonsense. The most African thing you can that iconoclasm was as African as people say American pie is, whatever you're saying. African pie, I guess. I don't know. That's what iconoclasm is, man.
Yeah, the evidence indicates that a lot of the early Egyptian Christian monks were former Egyptian pagan priests. And so what happened? They converted and they took a very zealous role and now opposing their former religion and all the associated symbols. So I always mispronounce his name, but I think everyone knows who I'm talking about. Shanut? Yeah. He was an iconoclast, but he was also, my understanding, is a former pagan priest. And so there's a story about him being en route to a village, a place called Phuit, Phuit, to destroy the idols there. They had heard he was coming, and they tried to stop his route. And in classic Kemetic tradition, they buried magical spells along the route to the village. But surprise, surprise, he reached the village unharmed, unhindered, entered the temple, and then smashed the statues inside on top of one another. And, there's some, you can find, there's There's a whole website. I put this on my Facebook page recently, actually, where you can find a website that has sources about his life and works, and that's just one such example. So he was taking that same mentality as he converted, and Adam's exactly right. It's Jabari paints a picture of like, oh, look, there's a white guys coming in there with pitchforks or something and scratching up the walls and something like that. And this is a very internal kind of thing. This is something that Egyptians are doing, and it's not an accident. It's not an accident that North Africa, and especially Egypt, is one of the earliest important headquarters, nucleuses, whatever, for early Christianity. It's because of fervent activity and deep thought, especially in Alexandria.
Yep.
And it was that way for a long time, really, until the Islamic invasion. And it's interesting, and I don't want to go too far off, but when you look at that, the people I think that we could say best preserved what it meant to be Egyptian were the Christians. They maintained distinctive Egyptian names. Egyptian Copt Christians, generally speaking, have different. They're not Arabicized in their names, and they're called Copts, which basically just means Egyptian. They're called Copts. It's almost Christian. It's almost synonymous to say Copt with Christian in Egypt now, but Copt just back then just meant Egyptian. It's a very interesting thing when you look at it. And I know a few Egyptian Christians because we do some outreach to Muslims together, and these are not folks who were ashamed to be Egyptian or ashamed to be African or anything like that. It wasn't. They didn't see themselves in any way as converting to some Greco-Roman a thing like that. That's not how they understood it, and you can tell when you read what they wrote. But Jabari does paint a sort of a simplistic view, and I'm worried sometimes that some people in his audience might be too willing to go along with a false narrative that he paints because maybe they haven't done some of the research they would need to do to be able to say, I don't think Jabari's right there.
Right. It's very interesting. Like two things you said. So I think when you look at the dynamic of like the transatlantic slave trade, obviously Africans being enslaved over here, you got your white colonizers, and then you also have like your house Negroes, if you will. You got like that kind of figure. It's like they kind of read those figures and dynamics into all of history. Right. I'm saying, so when they think about what's going on in the first century, first, second, third, fourth century, in Egypt, it's like they're looking at it through the lens of that model rather than saying, okay, what's going on at that time? Okay, let's understand what's happening at that time. And I think that kind of goes to your point, because as I understand it, and I'm getting this from a Coptic priest that I spoke to, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, I think even to this day, some of the Coptic liturgy, Egyptian Coptic liturgy, or Coptic Orthodox rather, the melodies trace back to Egyptian melodies, apparently. I'm saying, and they changed the word to reflect Christian doctrine, but apparently they didn't get rid of some of the melodies. Now, if that's correct, then that would be an example of how you don't have like this de-Africanizing, if you will. I'm saying, but rather just a matter of people really giving their lives over to Christ and adopting the doctrine that corresponds with that, and shunning idolatry and so on and so forth. So I think you have to be really careful. I'm just saying this because BK, as we do these shows, we always want to kind of get people the behind the scenes. You have to be careful about people creating narratives that aren't there. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And then even if it sounds familiar, then you got to be careful. We want to be good historians. We want to say, okay, what was going on at that time? That's what we want to do, rather than reading a narrative and eisegeting history.
And one of the narratives that Jabari keeps rehashing, and he used vocab as his foil for this, right? Because he's the white guy, right? So the white guy destroyed
the Paisan,
right? And the white man gave us the cross, but he gave us the cross with chains, right? As if these people couldn't tell the difference between what the slave owner was teaching and what the Bible actually says. And we know that they knew the difference because people actually interviewed the slaves, right? We have what's called the slave narratives. And I would like to share a couple of quotes from the actual slaves themselves and see what they said. So we have this one quote from Lit Young. He was enslaved in Mississippi and Texas. He says, she built a nice church with glass windows and a brass cupola for the blacks, and a yellow man, light-skinned black man, preached to us. She had him preach how he was to obey our master and missy if we want to go to heaven. But when she wasn't there, he came out with straight preaching from the Bible.
Oh!
So they know what's up. It's like, yeah, we're going to play, whatever. But when homie leaves, we're going to get to this exegesis real quick. You know what I mean?
Right. I love that quote. When he wasn't there, straight preaching from the Bible. I love that.
And this is from Clairebourne Gatlin. He was enslaved in Georgia. He says, but freedom, we always went to white churches on Sundays with pastors, but they never mentioned God. They always told us to be good niggas and mind our missus and masters. Right there. So they went to church. Nobody heard nothing about God. Right? Here's another one from Margaret Nickerson. She was enslaved in Florida. We had church with the white preachers, and they told us to mind our masters and missus, and we would be saved. If not, they said we wouldn't. They never told us nothing about Jesus. But I thought they gave us the cross with the chains, though. Right?
Right.
Here's another one. Bert Luster, enslaved in Tennessee. There was a lot of talk about conjure, but I didn't believe in it because them darkies could do everything to one another and have one another scared, but they couldn't conjure that overseer and stop him from beating them near to death.
What? Oh, snap.
Now, you hear these dudes say that about the Christian. Where was Jesus during the slave trade? The slaves was like, where was voodoo?
Hey, that's bars, though. That's bars,
man.
I need that quote. That's dope. That's bars.
We got to make a shirt that on the front says conjure real big and has like an X through it with a full quote on the back or something.
That's dope. That's dope.
So they clearly knew the difference. In fact, and they also had options. They had conjure people who were into sorcery and voodoo. And they're like, yeah, that didn't work.
Right.
That didn't work, fam.
Hey, if Jabari was there, he'd be like, I don't understand what the problem is. I'm wearing my red and black.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to the debate. Yeah, exactly.
Got my red and black on. What's the problem here?
Right.
Yeah, I want to say that I thought both of y'all did a really good job in staying poised, though, and not falling into the trap of letting all of those emotional arguments, take the shine off of, hey, look, we trying to focus on the content, and kept bringing it back to like, hey, I want to address your worldview and how's your worldview, speak to all these things. How are you going to explain all of this? Adam in particular, you did a really good job of, hey, let's bring this thing back, full circle. And I think by, Jabari continuously trying to win points by talking about vocab and different things like that. I think it actually it actually backfired on him, because after a while you just sitting there, it's like, dude, are you ever going to get to actually explaining what it is that you believe or answering these questions that are being thrown out at you? So I think in doing all of that, he actually, actually hurt himself. And it was a couple of people I actually seen even in the chat that was like, dude, we done heard you say that a couple of times. Like, when you will actually get to the content of what we here to discuss. So, shout out to y'all for keeping the main thing,
One of the
point. Oh yeah.
Hold on a minute. But you know what's funny? He says all that, right? Vocab. Him again using vocab as a foil destroyed Egypt. Vocab put us in chains with the cross, and he says all this, and then right after that, right at the 55-minute mark, he says Africa in the 13th century. Oh, this is right after Adam. This is when you brought up
Adams.
The Manta Musa, Adams. Yeah, I don't know why Sanada kept calling you Adams. Adams. This is when you brought up the Manta Musa quote, right? He goes and says at the 5502 mark, Africa in the 13th century, then that must be because the traditions of Christianity actually were just sort of indigenous to African. He says this.
Yeah.
Right. He's daggering himself, right?
He daggered.
Well, and and he goes on to say later on in the conversation, the whole in chains thing, implying that the tradition of Christianity started with Black people in chains, but yet in even earlier with this, because Adam made the point of the Manta Musa comment, and he was actually saying no, I agree with you, but actually it was even earlier than that. So he was trying to sort of steelman Adam's point. But again, later on, then he cuts himself with the whole idea of in chains. So which one is it? Is it an earlier than the 13th century, or is it when the slaves were in chains? So you gotta pick your mark, bro.
I think it's
and this goes
rich
back to
have
what,
an Egyptian talking and critiquing slavery.
But no, I mean, and then to Kevin's point, man, I mean, I think that's why you want to stay on track. Like you don't want these guys or whoever you're dealing with to take you here, there, and everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like it's good to have a particular point that you're trying to get to and just stay laser focused there. Because if you get off into all these different side points and all that kind of stuff, then now you give them space to avoid the real argument, which is what he's trying to do. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm always thinking, okay, is this a rabbit trail that I can go to and bring it back to my point? And if it's not, then I'm just not going to go there. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's something that I can either answer really quickly or bring back to my point, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's actually what I did in terms of bringing it all back around to that main argument I made about the one. Now, according to, as far as what BK was saying, interestingly enough, this book right here, I mentioned it several times in my live streams and stuff. But when I first started getting into apologetics, this is the book right here, reading through the slave narratives, that showed me that it's not the case that you just have Africans getting beat into Christianity. This is voices from slavery. You know what I'm saying, is what it's called. And it's actually in here that I came across the kind of statements that BK was talking about. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, I was under the same impression that, the kind of stuff that Jabari's model of how things went down, that must have been how it was. But when confronted with the actual narratives, that's when I'm like, oh, snap, there's something far deeper that's going on here. And to be honest, I'm just going to be real. At this point in 2021, with so much information out there, with so much, at your fingertips, just Googling stuff and the content that we put out and whatever, there's really no excuse for these old narratives, that Jabari is putting out there, to be honest. At this point, it's either willful ignorance or I'll just say maybe just ignorance. But in some ways, I think not necessarily him. I'm not going to put this on him, but I think many people out there are just flat out deceiving people. You know what I'm saying? When I think about like, the Hidden Colors video series that like super blew up. You know what I mean? I think they got a new one out now. Like for me, I can do like a 5-second Google search and I'm finding African Christians. I'm finding the kind of stuff that I found in this book right here. It doesn't really take that much. And so you got all these people who claim to be scholars and yet they never get around to telling this side of the story. Ultimately, it just doesn't fit their narrative. And so they're not going to tell that side.
And the reason for that, Adam, and I remember Elsie really helped me with that, is the fact of the matter is there's a lot of people out there, they're not looking for information, they're looking for affirmation. They're not trying to really seek the truth. They're looking for something that will help them, in what they already believe. So, and Elsie was telling me when I was going back and forth with somebody on Facebook one day, he was like, dude, you could stop trying to give information to him because the problem is not in his head, it's in his heart. And when when they have willed themselves to willfully believe a lie, you can feed all the information you want to their head, but they're never going to believe it because they're not in need of information, they're in need of inspiration. And until they get that inspiration, you can throw all the facts at them when you want to, and it's not going to do anything. And I remember, and this is what I was saying when you was talking about, the tactics and everything that, Kuka was saying. I remember he said in his book, if anybody in the discussion gets angry, then both people lose. So you and Vocab, it's one thing as I Am Apologist was talking about, it's one thing to get impassioned and be passionate about what you're talking about and different things like that. It's another thing to get belligerent, and neither one of you allowed him to get belligerent to where it takes it away from the point, and everything like that. So you allowed substance, to rule the day and not, style and all this other good stuff and everything. And there was a point in there, and I don't know if anybody else really saw this, but there was a point in there when y'all were talking, and I really felt like, he got to a point where it was like, okay, I really don't have a response to this. And so let me throw something else out there that will detract away from the point that you just made, and let's bring it back to something else. And those are the things that I look for as an apologist, is to say, okay, is this information actually sinking in, not to just their head, but is it really sinking into their heart? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all out here for, is to really change the hearts of people, not just changing their minds.
Good stuff.
Yes.
That's great. So, that's excellent.
So Adam, at this point, he turns to Jabari again because he wants him to really elaborate on his worldview, and Adam references the Bantu debate, and the questions that your friend asked about you know, his God, you know, this force, right? And how you said that we're kind of like the chair, and the chair is like this. And this is Jabari's response to Adam. He says here, you might have misunderstood part of what I said. I did say that what you are attempting to do in the Kemetic tradition is absolutely live into your divinity, and that all things are spirit. I didn't say that I am the same as the table. That's not what I said. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there's everything, there's the one. Everything is part of the one. Everything comes from the source. Everything comes from the source. Now, we have the transcript of that debate. And yeah, you know, we kept a file. You know, and here's the question that Adam's man asked him, and this is how Jabari responded to this. He says, "Brother Jabari, who is the God that you all worship or you ascribe?" And then Jabari answers, "That's a good question that I get sometimes from folks who are really genuinely trying to understand what we do, but may not understand everything sometimes. You've been told that we are, for example, polytheists. We should not describe our tradition that way. African traditions, most African traditions, all that I have found actually argue that the divine force is all things. How do you describe something that is everything? If the ceiling was the floor, on the floor of the ceiling, what would you call it?" And so they don't spend a lot of time talking about one divine force. They talk about how the force behaves in different instances. Now, I'm going to continue to quote, but he says that based on African traditions, he's arguing that, we're not polytheists, right? But in the book Slave Religion by Albert J. Ribetow, says, common to many African societies was a belief in a high God or supreme creator of the world and everything in it. It was also commonly believed that this high God, often associated with the sky, was somewhat removed from the uninvolved in the activities of men, especially so when compared with the lesser gods and ancestor spirits who are actively and constantly concerned with the daily life of the individual and the affairs of society as a whole. He's saying that, well, most Africans are not polytheists. But here, we clearly see that most of these African religions have a high God separate from what was going on, and these other lesser deities were the ones that people dealt with.
Yeah.
A deity?
What happened?
Oh no, I just said a deity.
What was it?
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean they would say that and actually I wonder if I had this book behind me now. I'll look for it in a second, but I've got a book by John and Beatty that goes into the same thing, just that it is quite normal in African traditions to have what's called a high god, whether it be Chikinge, Nyame, Chukwu, Olodumare. You have all these various different high gods. Even in some of the religions where we would call them Vodun, there is often a high god, and then you have like these intermediates, and these are going to be the ones that most people interact with and maybe take part in, some of the seances and dances and so on and so forth. So I said that to say, again, matter of fact, I just said it a second ago, we had to be careful about people creating narratives that aren't there. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they often do that. And some of the Black atheists in the conscious community will say things like, well, I don't believe in God. And what they really mean is, like the God of the Abrahamic faith, like some sort of monotheism. And they'll say things like that's not African and so on and so forth. But it's very much so is African. Like the idea of there being a most high and then beings that interact with humanity, more directly. I mean, although our God does interact with humanity, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's not a foreign idea, like whatsoever. You know what I'm saying? Right. And to be honest, I kind of felt like I don't want to call Jabari disingenuous. I mean, I'll just chalk it up to gamesmanship. But he regularly insinuated that I didn't know what I was talking about. When it came to the argument that I was making. And my thing was, honestly, like if I didn't know what I was talking about, then I wouldn't be asking the question to begin with. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't be making this argument. It kind of reminds me of it. I'm going to use a quick analogy, but like y'all remember on January 6th, we had that whole thing with the storming of the Capitol. Right. And one of the things that had the officials really alarmed is that it seemed as though some of those people who stormed the Capitol knew where to go to find certain documents, to find certain offices, and so on and so forth. Like the fact that they found them, these offices and documents that should be hard to find, was an indicator that they knew where to go, that they must have had some sort of map or something like that. Well, likewise, the reason why I knew what questions to ask Jabari and getting at the meat of his worldview as far as my ethical critique is because I know his worldview. I'm not just making it up. That's the reason why I asked the question to begin with. So he didn't say anything about the one prior to me bringing it up. He didn't say anything about, all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? I was the one who was using those terms, and he just affirmed that my understanding of his theology was correct as I was kind of gearing up to give my argument. So when he came back later on, I was like, oh, Adam, you need to study more, or you need to do this, you need to do that. It's like, bam, I gave you your worldview. You told me that I was correct about it, and then the argument followed. You just didn't like the conclusion. It's funny, again, if people go back to my podcast episode, God versus the Wu-Tang Clan, that happened before the Jabari debate. You know what I'm saying? And I'd already developed this argument based upon watching videos of Jabari and some other individuals who claim to be Kemetic spiritualists, like Baba Haru, Infudisi. There's another guy, I can never pronounce his name. It's like Rob Nefer something or other. I watched those guys, you know what I'm saying, and I try to understand the worldview and from their mouths, and then I form the arguments based upon that. And so by the time we got to the debate in Philly, and my man Wilt asked that question, the way that Jabari answered, I was like, oh, snap, this is what I've been saying. Like, I'm right about what they believe. And so, when I brought it up to him the other day, it's just like, man, I'm not basing this stuff. I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I listen to you guys. I try to critique based upon what it is that you say.
Right. Now, let me finish reading his response. I did a breakup real quick. So let me do the second part of his response. He says, it's a coalescence of divine energy that allows you to do certain things. Now, having said that, that means that I may call in a multiplicity of names. I am a priest of the shrine of Ma'at. So that is the shrine that I have consecrated with my queen. But I call it, before I get up here, I call certain names so that I don't see that as like being a different God. Does that make sense? It's a different type of energy. I believe that divine force is not just energy, it's also matter. But the fact is that when you see these things, our inability to see past with our five senses betrays us. So that what we do is we think that I am distinct from this table. Remember, you say he didn't say this, right? We think that I am distinct from this table, that he is distinct from me. And in actuality, that is, and to some degree, an illusion. And so this is a real complex topic.
Exactly. Right.
Now, he gives us a lot of his worldview right here, right? Now, he's talking about how, this idea of us being distinct from other things is an illusion, right? Well, in this book, A World of Difference, Putting Christian Truth Claims to the Worldview Test, says here, Eastern religion asserts that human beings suffer from a type of metaphysical amnesia, an ignorance of their divine nature, while one in essence with God or ultimate reality. Human beings erroneously perceive themselves as separate, distinct, and particular entities. This striking error in identity results in Maya, the Hindu term for, wait for it, illusion. What did he say? We think that I am distinct from this table, that he is distinct from me. In actuality, that is to some degree an illusion. Okay. So let me keep going. Let me keep going here. So when humans make wrong or immoral choices in life, and when they attach themselves to that which is ultimately unreal or insubstantial, this deception supposedly increases. The illusion about one's true identity must be overcome to, in a case, reunite with ultimate reality. Right? Let me go further down. But to this, man must be awakened or enlightened from this state of metaphysical forgetfulness. Right? So this is pantheism.
It's pantheism.
Pantheism is the religious belief that includes the entire universe in its idea of God. A person who follows the religious doctrine of pantheism believes that God is all around us throughout the whole universe. You know who also believes in pantheism? Obi-Wan Kenobi. When Obi-Wan first told Luke what the Force is, he says, quote, "The Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It is an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together." Jabari believes in the Force.
You got Yoda's quote, Alfredo. Can I do Yoda's quote on that exact same thing?
Go for it.
All right, so this is after he lifts the X-wing.
You open a can of worms now, man.
And listen to what Yoda says here, and think about how similar it is to what Jabari says. Ready? He asked Luke, "Judge me by my size, do you?" Well, you should not. And here's a speech to Luke. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and that ship.
I mean, that sounds eerily similar to what Jabari responded to the question, right?
Yeah. And see, and another thing is, you know, he told Vocab that his credentials for being able to critique Christianity is he has an MDiv. Here's the thing: if you don't know the differences between pantheism and Christian theism, go burn your whatever certificate you have. Whatever. I saw a certificate today by a Hebrew Israelite. But that's another story. Go burn it up because somebody has failed you. Who taught you that? In the words of Damon Richardson, who taught you that? Because the argument that Adam is making is a devastating critique, and Christianity does not have that problem because God is holy. God possesses aseity. He is not to be confused with creation. So there's a creator-creature distinction in Christianity that's just not there in this pantheistic New Age Kemeticism, so to speak.
Right.
And even when he was the Isaiah passage, BK and everybody, when he was, when Adam did a masterful job of really breaking that down contextually to, talk about what it really means. In Isaiah 45:7, it's like, dude, if you got an MDiv, you don't make those kind of mistakes in interpreting a passage like that. You're obviously able to look at the context. I mean, that's just 101 of interpreting the scripture and hermeneutics and stuff. So for you to be out here touting like you got an MDiv and that, should mean that you're a subject matter expert. I was like, dude, you could throw that MDiv out that's trash for you to be doing stuff like that, man.
Yeah, we really can't let people get away with that too. I just say this real quick that I can't tell you how many times I've come across somebody saying something like, I used to be a Christian, or I grew up Christian, or I've been studying Christian.
That means nothing.
And I'm telling you, I've been doing this for a while now. I can say that I've been doing this for a little while. I have not one single time ever met anybody who makes a statement like that, been able to articulate a robust Christian theology and biblical worldview and then critique it. I've never come across anybody like that.
All right,
I'm just saying.
No, facts.
Yeah, and I mean, he was confusing two Protestants in front of him with Roman Catholicism. We don't believe in transubstantiation. We didn't really get to this. But he's throwing out transubstantiation like it's a problem.
Or that whack picture of the Trinity he put up there. And I was like, come on, man.
You know what's funny about that picture is who does have a bird having sex with the man in their traditions, their art? Starts with a K, ends with an Emmett. We can't forget about the 14 pieces and the final piece of the puzzle, and everybody knows what that the final piece. I'll put it that way.
That's right. The final piece.
This God is dead, man. This God is dead. Number one.
Right.
Number two,
necrophilia.
The God that is performing a certain action upon the dead God is in the form of a bird. So you have necrophilia and bestiality
at the same time.
And that's a real picture, not some invented European picture with, two white guys and a white bird. You know what I'm saying? Sounds like the Larry Bird. Sounds like the Celtics in the 80s, by the way. Two white guys and Larry Bird.
This dude right here. So anyway, let me get to this. So, right, to a large extent, the belief system of pantheistic monism is reflected in the world religions of Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism. Let me go down a little bit. It says, including Transcendental Meditation, Self-Realization Fellowship, the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, probably known as Hare Krishnas, and such mind science groups as Christian Science and Religious Science. You know who didn't make the list? Kemet. So this is not Kemet spirituality. So what Jabari has is Brahmin holding a bunch of ankhs.
Oh, snap.
This is Jabari's framework
Right
here. It's Brahmin holding ankhs.
And I think a lot of people missed it, man. But like towards the end, I actually kind of called it out. Like what we're seeing in their teaching in terms of being a syncretism between, I guess, kind of gleanings of ancient Kemetic tradition and this New Age Sikhism, Hinduism, and all that kind of stuff makes a lot of sense. It makes sense why that's being put forth. If you think about the fact that the pillars of this modern Kemetic movement, some of which are these white New Agers from the 19th century. I mentioned, Helen Blavatsky and Leo Frobenius and Gerald Massey, some of these folks. It makes a lot of sense why you're finding these ideas trickling into, ancient Kemet, in this modern movement, because some of their forefathers and foremothers are these white New Agers, that they want to sweep under the rug. And so we can't let them get away with stuff like that, man. We got to call it out.
No, and to your point, Adam, one thing that I was noticing is that he keeps migrating modern thought into his supposed ancient contexts, which he constantly did all the time, especially the emotionalism that he would try to draw out with the whole raping bees and killing babies and raping women and all that stuff. And also some of the fellows behind the scenes, like my Native American background and religious practices are more ancient than this guy's stuff that he's proposing. Because he has no concept of honor shame society, a concept of a lot of these concepts that are in almost universal things. Like, yes, there's a ton of nuance and there's differences, but there's a lot of this stuff, like a lot of this stuff. Somebody said my audio is a little weird, so I might have to check that. So go ahead.
It's cool. So Adam, right? Once he tells you his worldview, you basically say this right here. That's in again, the world of difference, putting Christian truth claims to the worldview test. It says how the human self or soul can be identical to God in nature or essence, yet also at the same exact time and in the same exact way be separated from God. Right? Remember, he said we've become fallen, right, from divinity.
Right.
How is it logically possible for the self to be simultaneously one, united with God, and also not be one, separated with God? Moreover, how would a self or soul be reunited with God or ultimate reality when the self or soul is already and has always been one with God? This clearly asserts that A can equal A and also equal non-A, a violation of the law of non-contradiction. That's pretty much what you said in a nutshell, right, Adam? So,
yeah, in fact, and actually in the live chat, MJ Jackson brought this up during our dialogue last week. That what you see is the law of identity at work. You know what I'm saying? Because if he says something like, the force or some energy just kind of flows throughout everything, there are some African traditions that believe that, but that's kind of more like a panentheism, which is different than pantheism. Panentheism would be this notion that the divine kind of flows through everything, but the way that Jabari puts it, and this is why I was asking very specific questions, there's what you call an identity relation between everything that exists and the one. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what gets him into a lot of trouble. So those are some philosophical nuances that I'm not gonna get into all that in the kind of dialogue that we had, but in the questions that I was asking, I was really trying to tease that out. You know what I'm saying? Because then that's when you run into these problems, like the slide you just presented. Once you kind of hone in on that point, now that exposes all these problems that arise from that.
Now, Adam, you was kind enough to allow the conversation to continue. And the reason why I say that is the minute he said that your assessment of his worldview was correct, the video was really over. Because anything he says after that reflects on his worldview. It's the I'm rubber, you're glue.
That's it.
It's like there's rape in the Bible. There's this. And I told you, after that, I told you what you should have done was just concede and be like, you know what, you're right. The Bible is this composite sketch of these various myths that has been used to enslave Black and brown people for centuries. Why would the divine force do that?
right. Just flip it back on you. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it boils down to. You know, but again, this is where, so my mentality would, just in general, when I'm doing a worldview critique, listen, if I'm having a dialogue with you, you got one worldview, I've got the biblical worldview, then it's so easy for us to get into a Christianity versus, you know, whatever, you know, this in this instance, Kemet. Saying, okay, you got the Christian versus the Kemetic guy. And no matter what criticism I bring up, you're gonna, you know, reject it. You're gonna kind of push against it. So my goal is, I'm not trying to make it such that it's me against your worldview. I want to show you where your worldview is at war with itself. I'm saying that's what I want to do. I want to bring that to the surface, because once I do, now Adam Coleman is not your problem. You know what I'm saying, regardless of what I think, it's not the problem. Your worldview is at war with itself. And so now you got to sort that out. You know what I'm saying, you got to fight that battle and then get back to me. And that's really kind of my mentality. You know, just generally speaking, I think it kind of came out here. I want to reflect back onto you and say, okay, well, here's where your worldview, the two pieces of it clash. You know what I'm saying? And explain to me how you're gonna resolve that. and then I'm gonna let it rock after that.
And it was clear that he didn't want to do that. I'm sorry, MJ. Go ahead, bro.
No, I'm just gonna say real quick. Adam also demonstrated not only is his worldview internally incoherent, but you can't even live like it's true.
Right.
He had this brother has to live like a Christian, essentially.
Exactly.
I mean, how do you say that what happened with Derek Chauvin and George Floyd is bad on his worldview? You can't. But on the Christian worldview, you can.
Yeah. But he acquiesced to that, though.
He
said,
did.
no, that's also an expression of the one. I'm like, wow, he actually said that.
Right. But that's what's hilarious, though, because the funny thing about it was, so he would tell me, you know, oh, you're not quite understanding it correctly. And then he would come back and say exactly what I just said like 5 minutes earlier. Or he would say to Vocab, oh, you're not reading it right. You got the name of, you know, Tefnut wrong. Or
we're going to discuss that.
Oh, okay, I want to get ahead. But yeah, he would just come back and affirm literally what we said anyway. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny, man. It's funny.
Yeah, and the whole time for me, it did not seem as if he was interested in really explaining his worldview as much as he was trying to just get people away from the Christian worldview. And for me, as a Christian, you give me an opportunity to talk about the gospel, I'm going to take every opportunity, all of that time, to present as much information to you that will win you over to why this is the better or the correct and worldview and everything. But instead, he took his time doing everything else except say, like, dude, if you really think Kemet is the joint, then tell people about that. But instead, he spent all that time doing everything else. And I'm like, dude, for me, it just really felt like, dude, you're not sold out and really have conviction about this thing. Or if you do, it's not believable. The last thing, and then for me, it's like, okay, how do you love that kind of divine force or whatever? You know, like what draws me to that? There are things, obviously, so much within the Christian worldview that would draw me to saying, okay, this is a God that I can love it. This is a God I want to spend eternity with. This is, but with Kemet, even as I'm just listening to understand, I'm like, I don't see anything that's attractive about this for me to listen to. There was nothing attractive about it, at least not in the way that he was presenting it. So even if this was truth, he was saying nothing to draw me towards what it is that he believes.
Well, and I think that was so important. Oh yeah.
Real quick. Remember Kevin towards the end when he started talking about speaking things into existence? I wonder if that's ultimately the attraction. Essentially power that it gives you. Because when we turn on channel 21, well, it's 21 here in Phoenix, and when we see people on TBN talking about what's sometimes called name it, claim it, blab it, grab it, right? The gospel of greed, prosperity gospel, health and wealth. When we see those guys, right? When we hear them, we're like, you don't love Jesus. You love this Americanized Jesus you think that can get you stuff, right? And we see the gospel for them is really a means to an end. Jesus is not the end goal of their Christianity a lot of times, right?
Exactly.
And it's almost like he was going there. Well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I tried to put a positive spin on it and said, notice how you're imitating our God, not yours, with the power to speak via divine fiat.
Right.
But ultimately, it's like, is it really just something of power because you know, I wore red and black today. These are my war colors. I'm doing this thing with my staff that does something or other. And, you know, it's like, that's kind of what it seems like. You know, you wonder, but that was interesting.
I think that's a great point. That's a great point.
I was going to come to you anyway. So things turn a little R-rated at one point.
maybe even NC-17.
It got a little spicy.
And the kids,
spicy. So, you know, and not that you was really, I mean, you did add a little sauce to it, but
a little.
But his guy was the one adding sauce to stuff.
Vocab threw some slap.
You were speaking about, you know, some of the creation.
Creation via masturbation.
Yeah. So
that's what it is. That's in their text.
I'm scared to say this, but let's talk about that a little bit, Vocab.
I'm scared.
Like,
come on now.
Yeah.
There's a 2-volume set, The Gods of the Egyptians, by E.A. Wallace Budge, and anyone that gets into Egyptology stuff, at some point you come across Budge's work because he translated so much and was a powerful scholar. He's from the early kind of 20th century. And, you know, from volume 2, I simply was reading kind of a literal translation from one of their creation, but I don't even like calling it creation. It's really an origin story or an origin myth, right?
Theogony.
And say what?
Theogony. Yeah, it's a theogony.
Theogony.
Oh, is that what it is called? I don't even know that. Is that what it is called? Theogony?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you, guys. All right. Well, see, I'm learning. So, like, I simply was reading. And my point, ultimately, I think probably because of the way I embellished it. You know, like when Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction, it says he's quoting Ezekiel, but if you look up that passage, it's not really. It's like 2 or 3 words match. I was literally reading it. Okay, I was literally reading from the text, but I embellished it to hammer home the point. People might have got lost a little bit. What I was ultimately trying to get, and I did circle back around to it, is saying that this God is not nothing in Kemet presents you with a foundation for ethics and morality. There's no intentionality in this creation. You don't have a God who has always existed. And you have one God who it's not explained how he's there, and then he's spawning other gods. And it's fascinating the way that they have this particular God create in this particular situation. It's sort of like, imagine sitting around thinking, okay, I know how humans create, you know, how we reproduce. What would a God do if he was by himself? It's a very human invented story. Right. So what you have to like think about the rationale, and this is where it does get R-rated. So in normal sexual relations, the male member must be standing at attention. So he has to get aroused by his own shadow, because before he can begin the process of self-pleasure, he's standing at attention because he was turned on by his own shadow, because there's no woman around. There's no other God. So he's doing this by himself, right? In the gas station of love, he's using the self-service pumps. And so here he is. And then what happens is seed comes out. And Jabari was talking about apple seed and stuff.
Yeah.
He was
eating fruit vocab.
This God says my own seed. He's not talking about.
That was fake. Yeah,
that was that. Yeah,
he says my own seed, and then there's a bunch of places that seed could go, but the place this God had his own seed go was in his own mouth, and then he spits it or drops it out, and that is what creates those other gods. So it's like almost like how do we have a situation where other gods can come into being from this other God who kind of it creates himself almost, and you have this story, and it's one of many. And my point is, this is not a God who has intentionality or purpose or power. It's very human. It's very sexual. It's very erotic. To be frank, it's very bizarre. And so that's why he wants to, explain it with other things, and we don't understand. Notice his response ultimately was to try to play Kemet quiz. Let's play Kemet quiz. Do you pronounce this right? But you're not really explaining to us the situation. If you want to say that it's merely, shadow symbols or whatever, then explain it to us. Explain it to us in this way. Please help us understand. He never really did that. He was comfortable attacking our I'll say me attacking our perceived lack of information about some minute point. And I kind of charactered that later when I said, you're just asking us if it's on the south or the north wall. You know, we bring up an artifact, but do you know where it is, family? You know, it's like, bro, explain this. You're not doing your God any service because you're not actually explaining or exegeting. You're just basically saying, well, you're stupid because you don't know this point, but just explain it. We're just reading from your text. You know, I would have loved if you read from our text in more detail, because at one point, you know, when he's talking about rape, he's like, there's no penalty for the men. There's a death penalty for rape. It's like, have you not read the entire chapter? Why? How could you say that? And so that was what was going on. But I did embellish, and I want everyone to see how ridiculous this. It's kind of like Isaiah, where I'm not saying I'm Isaiah, but I'm just saying in the parts where he really goes after those false gods.
Right.
And some of it gets kind of there's some like stuff in there, right? And so I felt that, and so I knew Adam wasn't going to do that. I know not everyone appreciated that. And maybe that would have been a little more PG-13 if he didn't pull out some of the cheap tricks in the beginning. Right. I was like, here we go. Your God's
I told Vocab. I told Vocab he was in his frat boy bag heavy that night. You know?
Frat boys are my second most hated white people. What are you talking about? Number one are preps. Number two are frat boys.
I mean, what you saw
I'm just
in this discussion was an internal critique by Adam and a reductio ad absurdum by Vocab. That's what you saw.
That's right.
And this stuff is absurd.
Bring it out.
And to say that Christianity came from this is absurd.
Okay, so MJ, reductio ad absurdum. Can you explain that for the 70 people on here that may not understand these terms, brother?
It's not a Harry Potter spell, first of all.
Yeah. Okay. This is when you reduce your opponent's position to utter and complete absurdity. Okay? Yes, it is embarrassing. Yes, sometimes it can be controversial. But Jabari is making the claim that Christianity pretty much is a bad echo of Kemeticism.
That's what he says.
And what we're pointing out is that you won't find any of this pagan. This is one of the markers of pagan thought, that the gods had to have sex in order to create. You don't have that in Christianity at all.
Right.
But what you do have it in is the surrounding communities. All of them. Most of them, you know, for the most part. Right. That's why they had temple prostitution, because they figured, hey, if we have sex, we're going to make the gods have sex and they're going to send rain. But you don't have that. What do you have in the Bible? Don't do that, or you will be stoned to death. Right. No, you cannot manipulate the Most High God. But these gods could be manipulated through human sex.
Right.
But once again, bringing these things out, you force Jabari to defend these things, and if his deity is some pure force, you know, and we can talk about the Ba and the Ka, which the statues, with the statues housed the quote unquote force and allow for communication between human beings and the quote unquote force for the gods. I mean, how they can be impersonal principles. Once again, like I said, we can keep bringing these things out, but it does require a little bit of knowledge of what they believe. But Jabari is not going to tell you this stuff, and this is why people like Adam, people like myself, will point you to those sources. Hey, go just read up a little bit on this. Right. It just reduces it down to absurdity. Just a little
Vocab.
Bit.
What Vocab did was really important, because theogonies and cosmologies really help to anchor someone's worldview. Absolutely. You know, the beginnings of things play a major part. That's a great book by John Bowen. Love that book. Mm-hmm. So
chapter 4, as he was saying, has got the section on theogonies.
Well, let me say this too, just real quick. I mean, I think it's also important because honestly, a lot of times people don't know their own spiritual system. You know what I'm saying? And Vocab, you can attest to this when it comes to Muslims. Like, they don't really know what's in their own text. You know, they might get into Kemeticism or whatever based upon some video they saw on YouTube or whatever. And then so when Vocab brings out that, you know, apparently according to Kemetics, at least on one tradition, everything comes into existence through this pornographic, you know, series of events. I'll just put it that way. it's like, oh snap, like, you know what? Nah, I don't want no parts of that. I mean, like we want to put before people exactly what it is they're getting into, and sometimes just doing that can be deterrent. You know what I'm saying? But like, hey, before you get into this thing, this Kemeticism thing too heavy, is this really what you want to be a part of? Like, this is right. Are you really down with this self-stimulation creation type of situation?
Yeah, Jabari thought that he was a master debater, but I was showing that God was
Hey. Anyway,
Don DeMarco.
But let's look at some of this creation story. And there's another part of this creation story that also really shows you how flawed and how we shouldn't really subscribe to this, because it actually, well, I'll show you. It says, Atum was a self-created deity, the first being to emerge from the darkness and endless watery abyss that existed before creation, a product of the energy and matter contained in this chaos. He created his children, the first deities, out of loneliness. He produced from his own sneeze, or in some accounts, semen, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. The brother and sister, curious about the primeval waters that surrounded them, went to explore the waters and disappeared into the darkness. Unable to bear this loss, Atum sent a fiery messenger, the Eye of Ra, to find his children. The tears of joy he shed upon their return were the first human beings. There's huge implications here, because one, he's a self-created deity, which means he's a contingent being, but it's also illogical, because how can you create things before they existed? But right, so that's already an issue. But there was no purpose for the creation of human beings. It was all happenstance. He was just so happy to see the kids that he did make with intent and purpose that indirectly we show up. Whereas with God, the God of the Bible, like, he made us with intent and purpose. So again, another glaring.
And you know what? I think a lot of people miss that point, man. Like so Vocab made that point. So my argument really centered in on the moral piece, right? That was kind of like the target of my argument. But if you listen to what Vocab was saying, like, after kind of showing you the theogony and, you know, kind of the implications thereof, man, a whole lot of things go out the window. Because like you pointed out, like, if we're just kind of, you know, created by these tears from the Eye of Ra, who is crying tears about something unrelated to us, like, you know, Vocab pointed out, like, purpose goes out the window.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, whereas on Christianity you have like this love dynamic, relational dynamic intended for mankind. You know what I'm saying? From our, you know, our creation. You don't have that in Kemet. Like, all these different implications. I think a lot of people might have missed that, and Vocab brought that out. You know what I'm saying? Rationality. I think Vocab mentioned rationality in the dialogue. All this kind of stuff starts falling out of place once you understand what their beginnings are. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I think that's huge.
But their cosmology and theogony gets worse, because look at this. This is from The Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt by Richard H. Wilkinson. It says the principle of divine demise applies to all Egyptian deities. Text dating back to at least the New Kingdom informs us, right? Jabari kept talking about they have the oldest religious text, right? Cool. Dating back to at least the New Kingdom informs us that the god Thoth assigned fixed lifespans to both humans and gods. While spell 154 of the Book of the Dead unequivocally states that death, literally decay and disappearance, awaits every god and every goddess.
It keeps getting worse, fam. Because matter of fact, I don't know if you remember, BK. I think we talked about this. I can't remember what video it was, but if it is the case, I'm not going to go too far on this. But if it is the case that you have the eventual death of these gods and goddesses, then that means that the gods and goddesses of the Kemetic tradition are contingent beings. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? They're not necessary beings. They're contingent beings. And if you're going to base your, you know, first of all, you can't possibly be the maximally great being, the greatest possible being that could exist and be a contingent being. There's so many different ways you can go there. Yeah, but if you can die, that means that you're a contingent being, and you can't possibly be the greatest conceivable being like that, which means that your worldview is going to be built on some being that is certainly less than what we see depicted in the Christian tradition.
That's why he's not Kemetic. He's Hindu. He's Eastern religion. Which which I hate to say,
is it Kemeticism with like a Hindu app? You know how you like your basic phone and you can like add on apps and stuff like that. Is it like the Hindu app? And
he sells a false bill of goods, though.
Right.
Because if you're actually looking for an authentic Kemetic experience, he can't give that to you. Because that's not what he's providing based on his worldview.
After I read that account of that God, I don't know if I want the authentic Kemetic experience.
Nah, I don't want it, man. But I'm telling you, bro. But seriously, this is really at the heart. And I wish we could have got to this in the dialogue. But really, when you think about the different worldviews in the the conscious community, whatever we want to call it, they're all offering different things. I'm saying now, Kemeticism particularly, they're offering some level of divinity. Like you are gods, or you are one with the God, you're divine, or something like that. As above, so below. I mean, they offer these kind of things to bait you in. But if you really start teasing out the specifics of the worldview, not only is it the case, as we'll get to in a minute, that if it is the case, if their theology is true, then even if you are one with the one, then you are permanently stained with evil. Isfet, number one. Number two, if all these gods and goddesses are going to cease to exist, then
what hope is there for us?
What hope is there?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that was the big thing in listening to me is, in answering those 5, crucial questions of a worldview. It's like, what hope is there for my destiny? If my gods are going to die, they were responsible for my creation. Like, why would I serve them? If they can't preserve their own life, what kind of sense is there eternal life for us? It's like, the Christian worldview just sounds a lot more attractive and believable than that. That just doesn't make any sense to me,
Bro, that's perfectly stated. John 17, what did Jesus say? And this is eternal life, that they may know thee.
Know Jesus Christ and the one who
you sent.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
Kemeticism can't offer you that. They can't give you that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
His vocab, Jabari's response to you, for the most part, was basically, we are talking clearly about something that is symbolic. We're not talking about a dude. You're not talking about a teenager, as you described. It's all you've done is you've read a text and done the Beavis and Butthead. But you need to actually have an understanding of what you're reading. Now, he's not the only one that says this. A lot of people in the conscious community, when you bring up this idea of the multiple gods and the pantheons, they will tell you that, well, no, these netters were natures, principles of nature. These are symbols, right? My question has always been, well, where do you get that from? Like, did the actual ancient people of Kemet believe that? But where did you get that from? Guess what? I found out where they get it from now. And it's not from the ancient Kemetic priests. It's from Plutarch. Okay? And this is from the Egyptian Handbook of Egyptian Mythology. It says Plutarch was fascinated by Egyptian religion and wrote a book on this topic called Concerning Isis and Osiris. He could not speak or read any form of the Egyptian language. So he had to rely on conversations through interpreters and speculations about Egyptian deities found in the works of earlier classical writers. Plutarch's narrative of the life and death of Osiris and the wanderings of his widow, Isis, is the one commonly used in popular books in Egyptian mythology. So their go-to guy can't read the Middle Knitter, even though it was the priests that actually created that language, right? So, actually, you know what? Let me, for the sake of time, boom. He stated purpose in writing the book was to seek universal truths that he believed to lie behind the myths and beliefs of all cultures. He quotes other writers' far-fetched allegorical interpretations of Egyptian myth. So this idea that it's allegory actually comes from him, right? Again, with Plutarch, as with all foreigners, the animal gods of Egypt were a sore stumbling block. And he is fain to pass them off as, wait for it, mere symbols or utilitarian interpretation. Gee, I guess we wonder where we heard that idea, right? Wow. But Greeks and Egyptians, or Egypto-Greeks, brought up under Hellenic influence, desired, like Plutarch himself, to steer a middle course between atheism and superstition. Wherefore the grosser side of the Egyptian religion was dropped or treated symbolically. You know what I mean?
That's Jabari all day. I mean, that's his approach, right? Yeah, he's always talking about
his allegory. Sounds like Kemeticism, modern version, might be the white man's religion.
And listen, the ascetic philosopher of Alexandria, who adopted a shaven crown and white linen robes, was a member of an artificial esoteric society that was called into being by the intermixture of Greek and Egyptian civilization. But it is to Plutarch we owe our knowledge of this society, and his mistakes and misconceptions show us the distance by which it had become separated from its Egyptian original. This is from the Journal of Hellenic Studies, volume 29. So when they talk about, oh, it's only symbols, they get it from Plutarch.
Yeah.
A white man in, past the 1st century AD.
Wow.
So, but we have the white man's religion.
You know what I think would be helpful, and I know that you all have sources and have made videos and all this other good stuff, but just for people who are interested, and I've actually went into Amazon while you all were on here and put some stuff in my little book wish list and everything like that. But I think within our community, and I know we've talked about doing that before, is developing sort of like a book reading list, of educational sources, where if someone has either themselves or a family member that is caught up in Kemeticism or is being drawn into that, something that we can go and read and educate ourselves up on, educate other pastors, but just creating some type of resource list to where they can go to look at their sources as well as apologetic resources on that. And one thing, I'll just say this, my last thing, he didn't say anything, was about, the chapter on Kemet in urban apologetics. If I know everybody everybody in the community is reading this book right now, and it's got a whole chapter on there from the dude that you just battled not too long ago, I would have gone ham and at least speaking something on that. So for me, again, he did not seem to value his worldview enough to really take that opportunity with thousands of people on there to really educate and tell people about it. And for me, again, it didn't feel authentically sold, by him and everything like that. So again, shout out to you all, because I think you did an excellent job in presenting the Christian worldview and the gospel. And man, Adam, when he kept throwing the scripture out there and saying your God created evil, and then he just go to another call or something like that. Dude, I felt your pain in that one, because it's like, dude, if you don't give this dude an opportunity, so to sit back and wait 5 minutes for him to come back around to you to be able to answer to that stuff, yo, man, I need some patience like you got, because I'm telling you right now, I'd have been all like, no, you won't give me a chance to explain this. You ain't gonna just go to something else. Like how you sat, dude. I could not believe it. He was, Adam, you the genius. He's like, yo, man, you slight me again. I ain't ready. That's
right.
Adam was definitely classy, and I was taking notes on the facial expression, because Adam's poker faces
Adams.
Adams.
Bro, Adams.
But when you know you got the answer, you can afford to wait and be like, okay, we're gonna get this work though.
There's a method to the madness.
He talked a little trash too. Adams talked a little trash. He said, "Bring it."
Right. I mean, it is what it is, man. I mean, but I think it's sometimes. I mean, it all depends on the situation. In that instance, I mean, I'm on his channel, and it's like, I would like to come back on his channel. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like,
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I hope so.
Vocab.
Yes,
There's something that you brought up at the debate, and they don't like it when you bring up this particular thing, and that's wretched Kush.
Oh,
can you talk a little bit about wretched Kush?
Yeah.
And no, we're not talking about weed.
All right.
Gotta find out what
that
that
is. Bad weed. We're not talking about that.
Yeah, so
see
Egypt,
Phil Fox over there Googling, Richard.
Well, the phrase itself, sometimes it's translated vile Kush, sometimes it's translated wretched Kush. So, and a lot of times you'll see it with a K, the Kush, sometimes with a C. But either that phrase itself, wretched Kush or vile Kush, I'm talking to the live chat because I know you guys, of course, know this. So it's the common way that Egyptians spoke of their Nubian neighbors. This was a common way that they essentially denigrated them. And there's a good book that Alfredo, you BK Apologist, shared with me by Stuart Tyson Smith. It's on Routledge. Wretched Kush, Ethnic Identities and Boundaries in Egypt's Nubian Empire. And it's just this way to kind of denigrate, downplay, talk trash. And it's really what we might call in the 21st century a trope, meaning it's almost like they wouldn't say Kush without saying wretched Kush.
Right.
It was almost like the way you would describe Kush is you would always have that adjective attached to them. Right. And so, you see an ethnic element at play. And that's important because even Jabari, I've heard him say, I'm not saying I'm an ancestor of the ancient Egyptians. I believe I've heard him say that. And I don't think a lot of the Kemet guys kind of claim that. They kind of understand probably, Mali, probably over here, this and that, some of them taking DNA, stuff like that. But the idea is this is an African spirituality that I'm identifying with, right? But it's like, well, how did these Egyptians view the other, and specifically those folks in Nubia? They call them wretched Kush. They talk bad about them. And so I brought that up at the debate, and I thought it was important. And he kind of tried to act like, I don't know what I'm talking about there again. And so I mentioned real briefly an article on it. I didn't bring the book, but it's sort of a stock thing. You can even Control F in certain Egyptian documents if you have them digitally, and you can find the phrase itself and look, here's how they talk about the Kushites. But that's what that was all about.
Right. So a quote from that book says, Egyptian ideological stereotypes presented Nubian ethnicity in negative terms, in this case as cowards. In the celebratory monuments of the ancient Egyptian state, Nubia could not simply be referred to by its ancient name, Kush, but must always be wretched Kush. The negative qualities of Nubian ethnicity help to define the positive qualities of Egyptianness. The ideologues of the Egyptian state created similar oppositional ethnic categories for political ends. Thus, Kush, the ancient toponym of Upper Nubia, was transformed into wretched Kush. After the Egyptian New Kingdom conquest, wretched connotes not only inferiority, but also a sense of foreordained failure in any rebellion against Egyptian authority. The mandatory linkage of wretched Kush also activated sympathetic magic to work against Nubians. So
I didn't know that part.
Yeah. They would create spells, and the spells would not work unless you said the term wretched Kush.
That's deep.
Okay. They got racist magic up in here, bro.
That's deep. That's deep.
They got some racist magic.
Wow.
So
it's beef for real. It's beef for real.
So now, we cover a lot of stuff we're still going to cover the debate, but the way I want to frame it now is I think the good thing about this particular dialogue that you guys had is that we got to really see Jabari's fighting style. At the debate, there wasn't a lot of back and forth because it was a formal debate. You had time limits or what have you. But in this dialogue, there was a lot of going back and forth. So therefore, we got a larger sample size of how Jabari moves. And I think it's important for us to look at his style because a lot of people in this community that we'll be reaching out to are going to mimic this style. Sure. And his style is basically three things, right? It's straw manning, it's the nos kuke fallacy, and quibbling. Okay, so
it's like the tail of the tape, for those who watch boxing,
right. That was the idea.
24-inch reach, and okay, you got
that's exactly it. So
it's like Logan Paul here.
Straw man, right, is by exaggerating, misrepresenting, or just completely fabricating someone's argument. It's much easier to present your own position as being reasonable. But this kind of dishonesty serves to undermine honest, rational debate. So to show you an example of that, Adam, can you actually read your own quote here?
Yeah, sure. I think I know where this is going, but
can you do your impression of yourself?
I'm gonna do myself in the Yoda voice or something. But right, it's all about going back to the tradition of our ancestors. Here's the thing: you can have a full description of what your ancestors believe, right? And you would know what they believe, but that wouldn't answer the question in terms of whether or not what they believe was true, right? So here's the issue. I'm saying just because our ancestors believed it, that doesn't mean that we have to shut our brains off and no longer think for ourselves and investigate the claims of our ancestors. That's what that's what standing on your shoulder. I'm sorry. That's what standing on the shoulders of giants looks like. My bad.
Keep going.
So here's the thing. When it comes to mathematics, somebody could say 2 + 2 = 5. I don't care what culture you're from. That's a false statement, right? And likewise, if there's something true about the world independent of why, I don't know what I'm saying here. If there's something true of the world independent of what I think about it.
No, what Jabari thinks about it. Adam's over here misquoting himself, bro.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to read up. I'm reading it up the screen, but it's not making sense to me. I'm sorry, but Jabari thinks what I or Jabari thinks about it, independent of what everybody or anybody thinks about it. If there's something true about the world, then we want to investigate whether the worldview aligns with that truth or not. And anybody can assess that. That's not and anybody can assess that. That's not a matter of everything is not about downing somebody's culture. Okay, I'm sorry, I was misreading.
That's fine. So that's what Adam says, right? He's saying that regardless of who we're speaking about, what matters is what that person or persons say is true or not. That's what we need to investigate, right? That's the point.
Let me key in. The reason why I said that now, like going back to the conversation, is like Vocab had already made this point. You know what I'm saying? And Jabari was trying to edge Vocab out of the conversation on the basis of him being a white dude. As Jabari put it, I guess chastising Africans for returning to their culture, which is not at all what Vocab was doing. It's not a matter of what you choose to do in terms of what tradition you subscribe to. The question is, what is the tradition, and does it stack up to scrutiny? Does it stand up to scrutiny? That was the question. Right. So I was trying to reiterate that point that Vocab made. Yeah.
And Jabari says in response, synopsis.
Can I read it?
Sure.
Synopsis. Brother Adam says African traditions are false. European traditions are true.
Didn't he also say at one point, Brother Adam just told us that Vocab is God?
Vocab is God.
Yeah, the way he was coming back and misinterpreting the stuff, purposely and intentionally misinterpreting the stuff that y'all was saying, and like trying to these summary arguments that he was trying to make. I was like, bro, how did you get all of that out of what he said? It was just like mind blowing for me. Like, are you serious?
He did this throughout the whole thing.
The whole time, dog. He's like,
and he's not even good at it. You know who's good at straw manning? Tazariak is really good at straw manning because he will do it subtly. He'll reiterate your point and change a verb tense, and then come back, and then do another tweak, and then come back and do he's actually really good at straw manning. This is sloppy.
Yeah, it's straw manning like on steroids or something. He was on a whole another level, dog. I'm like, bruh, the way you reframe my argument is nothing like what I just said. Here's the thing. Here's what you should do. If I'm going to reframe your argument, I'm going to reframe it in such a way that is stronger than the way you actually presented it. That's called steel manning. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm going to do. If I'm understanding your argument correctly, then I'm going to reflect it back to you and say, okay, well, here's the strongest possible way you can make it, and here's why it's still wrong. You know what I'm saying? And that's what you want to do, or just reflect it back to the person where they said it. This dude, he was killing me all night, man, with those the rewording.
Now the second thing that he does, right? That's the first thing. He did that throughout straw manning. That's one thing, right?
Throughout.
The second thing is the nos kuke fallacy. Now, a lot of us are familiar with the tu kuke, right? Meaning, well, what about you, right? The nos kuke is defending another's evil actions because I am or we are guilty of the same thing or even worse, right? Because remember when Adam addressed his worldview and he said that his assessment was correct, he never defended his worldview. What he did do is say, "Oh no, we're all in this together," right? And here's an example of that, right? If your deity created all things, and that if evil exists, then your deity created evil.
Yeah, they harped on that point. Oh my God!
Yeah,
that's where it became a 2-on-2 debate. Clearly,
it was bad.
Right. Absolutely.
Sinetta saved him.
Yeah.
Again, he says, if there's evil in the universe, then your divine force created it. Notice how he's even using his term to describe our worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
We don't have a divine force, fam. We have a non-contingent being that's timeless, ageless, and immaterial. That's what we have.
Personal. Personal. That's a key.
Right.
And personal. There you go.
It really felt like he was going into the Google of the Bible or a search engine of the Bible and typing in evil and God and just figuring out any path. It's just like you don't actually read that full passage and come to that conclusion, man. Like, come on, bro.
So even Sinetta jumps in, right? the proper answer would be yes. And to back it up would be he created it for his purpose. And he wanted to see he created it because he created good and evil.
You don't have to help God.
Wait, who was that? Who was that?
Netter.
Yeah, I mean,
who was that? Phil? Who?
Yeah.
Man, you got it, bro.
But the funny thing about it was,
yeah.
I mean, the funny thing about it is these dudes bang on the Bible all the time, and then all of a sudden you're a Bible scholar. Come on, dog. I mean, it's like, and I'm not even knocking them for that. Like, I don't mind people raising objections, because that's why we're there. That's fine. But it's like, if you give me an objection and I give you an answer, then either you engage my answer and show me why I'm wrong, or you just got to pick another objection. You know what I'm saying? And so I thought with both of those guys bringing up, evil and so on and so forth, in the back in my mind at that point, I'm like, okay, I've made my argument. Here's something they're trying to throw out there to detract from my argument. So let me take this off the table for you. All right, now let's get back to my argument. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I was, going back and forth in that. But your boy Sanetta kept sideswiping. I'm like, I'm trying to deal with Jabari.
But the metaphor, and then I told you this on the phone, man. But the metaphor that you use to break down that scripture and really talk about what it meant in context, when you talk about breaking in a guy's house and God being, righteous for, justified and shooting him, that was just brilliant. It really, for anybody who was not familiar with the text of the scripture or even that particular text, it really brought it home to make it easy to understand. So again, shout out for keeping your your cool and actually doing that, man. That was dope.
There's something that you have to remember real quick, and this is for the people in the chat. When you're having these conversations and someone pulls the what about you or what about us, they're conceding to you.
Right.
Because if they thought they have a chance to defend or contradict what you're saying, they would. They cannot, so they resort to the Tukoke or the Nos Kuke.
That's a good point.
That's important. And that's why I even said to him, oh, I'm sorry, my fault, MJ. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro.
Well, yeah, that's what I said to him. I said, basically your argument is to try to say we're in the same boat. So now that's your argument. I'm going to show you how I'm out of the boat and you're still in the boat. That's my next step. I'm saying, and then you got to grapple with that. So that was my thinking. Go ahead, MJ.
And this is probably going to get into the quibbling. And I might hold off, but I mean, Jabari wanted to explain why Vocab was wrong in his citation of the creation story. Oh, there are some. We have an issue with the language.
Nice,
what does the T mean at the end, brother? What does the T mean at the end, Vocab? Say it. He wanted to yell and fuss and things like that. And here's the thing. And when we graciously try to correct the brother that no, there are several words for rape. Also, there is a certain word for evil. You're reading from the King James, brother. You need to let King Jimmy go, and there are better translations than the KJV. For far as what God is doing, they wouldn't allow that. It's a different set of standards. That's just bad argumentation. Right. And I'm sure Vocab being a pre-supper would understand that arbitrariness is also a red flag.
Yeah, it's a sign of an inconsistent worldview that has no ultimate standard there. Right. But you notice, when he wants to explain creation via masturbation, he's going to ask me about what is the word shadow. What's the word for shadow? And is it in a feminine form? But Adam can't explain the context of Isaiah. He can't refer to the Hebrew word. He can't do any of that. That's not allowable. That's being dishonest. But he's gonna try to say,
check out. You get all the eye rolling and all this guys like, oh no, like you trying to explain away. It's like, it's just disingenuous in my opinion.
Yeah, that. Remember that?
Right. It's like, come on, bro.
He was over there doing interpretive dance. Adam was doing apologetics, and Jabari was doing interpretive dance. But you made a good point. You were saying this is not saying created evil in some ultimate cosmic creation story. That's not what it's talking about. Even regardless of how you understand the word, that's not what it's saying. And that seemed like a simple enough, straightforward, basic, true point. But he wouldn't allow it. But then, what does shadow mean?
Which brings us to the final technique that he used, quibbling. We quibble when we complain about a minor point and falsely believe that this complaint somehow undermines the main points, right? For example, in 80-minute mark, so you mentioned one deity named Tefnut. Who was Tefnut? You read it. Do you know who Tefnut is? Oh, let's get. He answered. Are you Googling? What do you see when we see the screen?
Bro, that was hilarious, yo.
No. The part where we could see it, the reflection in your glasses, and he was like, "There's no lenses."
Meanwhile, here comes Vocab and
Brother, there's no lenses.
Coming out with book after book after book after book, like killing them. It was crazy. Another instance, you can't just read someone saying, "Hey, retainer sacrifices, people through this." What you said, they threw their servants under the pyramids. You now need to justify your statement. And when you are unable to, by the way, Vocab, you don't even need to look, because I'm going to tell you, you're not going to find it. I'm going to tell you, you're not going to find it. Here's the thing, the retainer sacrifice, right? At the Royal Cemetery of El Khaddab, the tombs of the first dynasty kings from Aha are accompanied by subsidiary burials. These burials are arranged in rows or blocks, either extending from the royal tomb, as was the case with Aha, or surrounding it. The position of the subsidiary tombs compared to the royal tomb is believed to reflect the relationship of their occupants to the king during life. Several tombs were found to contain skeletal remains. The analysis of some remains found in the subsidiary graves of Aha's tomb has shown that none of the individuals buried were older than 25 years. This suggests that each of them may have been chosen to be buried along with the king. So yes, there is such a thing as retainer sacrifice. Now, his issue, the thing he wants to quibble about, well, were they buried underneath the pyramid? Well, actually, no, they were not. They were buried.
I didn't mean that literal either. Yeah, I feel like most people would understand. I didn't mean it literally. They were underneath it because they had already built it. How would they be underneath it? They're the one. You know what I'm saying? That's what he wanted to cool about. I was doing it in a way, but yeah, they're buried on site in these little places there. But if you notice, I mentioned strangulation, which is how they found a lot of these victims dead. Right. So I knew what it was about, but he quibbled with. I used parlance. Throw them under the tomb. That's not literally true.
Right. But no, we're going to go with that, though, because this is what he wants to throw at you. This is what he wants to quibble about, where they were buried under, right? So there's this thing called a mastaba, right? A rectangular superstructure of ancient Egypt, tombs built of mud brick or later a stone with sloping walls and a flat roof. A deep shaft descended to the underground burial chamber. And here's one of the mastabas that still are, standing. A lot of them have been, withered away because of the elements, but the mastaba is the precursor to what, ladies and gentlemen? The pyramids. So were there any retainer sacrifices put underneath these mastabas? Well, in the archaeological and art of ancient Egypt, burials of sacrifice retainers have also been discovered in association with Saqqara mastabas 3503, 3506, 3505, 3500, 3111, and the extra bodies in the burial chambers of mastabas 3357 and 3505. So, okay, they weren't buried underneath pyramids. They were buried underneath mastabas. How does that change what Vocab was saying?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
quibbling.
Facts, right.
Quibbling. Oh, so you're saying that there are spells. I would not call them spells. I would call them affirmations. I would say that they are words of power. Okay, I thought that was interesting, and I decided to talk to my good friend, Egyptologist, Dr. David Folk. For those who may not know David Folk, he's been on the platform a few times.
I need to get him on my show, bro. I got to get his information. That guy is good.
No, he knows what he knows what he's talking about because he's a specialist in ancient Egypt and the Bible. He received his PhD from the University of Liverpool in Egyptology. David holds 3 master's degrees. He holds an MDiv degree and an MA in Near Eastern and Biblical Archaeology and Languages from Trinity International University, and a 3rd master's degree in Near and Middle Eastern Civilizations from the University of Toronto. His BAs in philosophy is from the University of British Columbia. His research has been focused on 4 primary interrelated areas: the history and rituals of ancient Egypt, the Old Testament, the Exodus, chronology, the digital humanities, and origins. He has also published in archaeometallurgy, lexicography, ancient warfare, and new religious movements. So
you sure he's qualified to speak on this?
Just a little, just a smidge. So, this is my guy, right? So I text him and I said, question. A Kemetic priest says that a better translation for the word spell is affirmation. Would that be correct? His response is, a better translation would be saying or utterance. However, the Egyptians are not basing their religious ideas upon our recent notions of Ghanaian magic, but upon the metaphysics of their age. If I say, I wish the lice from 1,000 camels would invest your bed, that is a saying, but it's also a curse. It is the use, not the terminology, that determines the piece of writing. And for the Egyptians, writing was inherently an object of magic. So the utterances were indeed spells as we would define them.
That's a good answer. That's a really good answer.
Yeah, that is a good answer, bro.
And here's the thing that you brought up as well, Vocab. You brought up about, you asked him, well, which spell are you going to use to get over these gods?
Right.
And he threw a fit when you said that. Well, here's the translation. It's written in the back of a scarab. This was buried with the person who's going to try to make his voyage into paradise. And, let me just read it. This is the actual spell. He says, "Oh, my heart of my mother, oh, my heart of my mother, my heart of my different ages, do not stand as a witness. Do not oppose me in tribunal. Do not show your hostility against me before the keeper of the balance. For you are my Ka, which is in my body, the protector who causes my limbs to be healthy. Go forth for yourself to the good place to which we've hastened. Do not cause our name to stink to the entourage, who make men in heaps. What is good for us is good for the judge. May the heart stretch, i.e. be happy, at the verdict. Do not speak lies in the presence of God. Behold, you are distinguished, existing as a justified one." Book of the Dead, spell 30. Basically, don't snitch on me, because I just told all these guys that I didn't commit all these sins. So don't snitch, man.
I phrased it as tell your heart to shut up.
Right.
That's the way I phrase it in the parlay.
Stop snitching. Stop snitching.
Stop snitching. Stop snitching. So, I mean, it's
yeah, it's very interesting too. Like going back to David Falk's point, he said something in there about how writing itself was understood to be magical in some sense, and that should resonate with somebody like a Jabari, because they believe that meta nature is divine speech. Like the very language itself, they believe to be spiritually powerful in some sense or another. You know what I mean? So I said that to say, well, actually, let me go here with it. One thing we have to be careful about, and I don't know if this would be a different strategy or maybe just kind of part of the equivalent thing, is it's like when people try to set themselves up as like the preeminent authority. And I think Vocab kind of brought this out in the dialogue. It's like, okay, well, we can't trust the translators. We can't trust these scholars. I can't put a refereed article or article from a referee journal in the chat. You say like, no, we've got to sit under your teaching, Jabari.
Yeah, but we can trust you.
We can trust you, right? I mean, come on, man. That's not how real scholarship is done. But I think when like the equivalent stuff, like if you say, okay, well, what is shadow, or what wall was the such and such written on, or the one thing they asked me was like, how was the earliest text of written blah 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 blah. All that stuff is to create this aura of competence. That's really what it is. It's a rhetorical device where in any given debate, any given dialogue, one of the I guess I can put it like unspoken elements of a dialogue is who holds the power in terms of competence. I'm saying that's what people are looking at. Onlookers are looking for that kind of thing. So if I can show that I've got some level of knowledge that you don't have, or if I can kind of get like a minor point where I can be a stickler about it, then I can gain leverage in the conversation by appearing to have more competence. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is he's doing that on stuff that really is inconsequential to the arguments at hand. You know what I'm saying? And he's never getting around to the actual meat of the argument. And I think that we have to be really careful about that. And to his defense, he's not the only one in the conscious community that does that. It's actually a pretty common tactic, amongst I've seen guys like, Brother Polite do the same thing, with you didn't pronounce such and such Arabic word right, or whatever. It's like, come on, man, like get down to the meat of the argument.
Yeah. Because their whole goal is to be impressive, not impactful. You know, they're there to appeal to the masses of people who are not educated and probably will never pick up a book and research the things that y'all are talking about, but they will listen to whoever sounds like the more competent authority in there. So their whole thing is to try and gain influence with the people, you know, in the crowd. And I remember Dr. Sarita Lyons talking about that one time at a conference, and how that was one of their strategies, was to gang up on the Christian person to win the crowd, sort of like gladiator, you know, whole type of thing. But she talked about how behind the scenes, the arguments that person was making was eating her up on the inside. And I really felt like he would never admit it, but I think some of the things that you all were saying, and, you know, were planting seeds in him that he knew he wasn't prepared to deal with it at that time. But he still has got to do something to save face because he's on the platform at that point, you know. So, you know, shout out to y'all for not letting him get away from those things and keeping him in that, you know, keeping him in the box and saying, no, you here now. You got to defend what it is that you believe. Don't try to, you know, deflect and do all these other big words that y'all, you know, threw out there and everything like that. But, you know, you got to stay in here and defend what you believe.
And to your point, I mean, and to be honest, now I'm going to show my cards a little bit, you know. So, you know, at one part in the dialogue, I was answering some questions. He pulls out some supposedly difficult passages in the scriptures about like the law and all and so on and so forth. And really, people have written volumes on this kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, people have spilled a lot of ink over like the problem of evil and all these kind of things. You know, typically you don't want to handle those kind of things like in snippet fashion. But, you know, from my perspective, I felt like, you know what, in this kind of dialogue, I'm going to let you know that I'm not afraid to go wherever you want to go in the conversation. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take your toughest argument, and I'm going to go item by item exactly where you say you want me to go. And then I'm going to put the heat back on you again. If you notice throughout the dialogue, I mean, really, me and Vocab were the ones kind of really going into the teeth of the defense. Like I said, I mean, I'm tackling stuff about, you know, rape and this law and that law and so on and so forth. Yeah. You know, we had that one portion where we were dealing with the issue of free will and stuff. Like me and Vocab, we didn't shy away from those discussions. You know what I'm saying? You know, we show, okay, we have genuine differences in terms of how we approach this and that. We didn't shy away from that stuff. Really, Jabari was the one who was being evasive. And I felt like that was important.
And Sonetta.
See that. And Sonetta, sure.
God doesn't need that.
I'm gonna roll out, family. I gotta go spend some time with the kids before they hit the bed. Love y'all.
Hey, good to see you, bro.
All right.
Now, Adam, you know, you brought up a good point about, you know, where are we gonna go, right? Because in the worldview, you know, theogonies and cosmologies really help to ground the worldview. Another part of the worldview is, well, what happens to us at the end? Where do we go, right? And when we look at actual Kemetic texts, it doesn't look too good for a whole lot of us because, right, according to ancient texts, especially for women are going to have a hard time because according to ancient texts, literate and educated Egyptians believed that creation and regeneration specifically belonged to the male gender. Men were thought to be responsible for offspring from a sexual union, not women. Goddesses were believed to be protected vessels, essentially. Egyptian women had to shift their gender and masculinize themselves to enter the fields of peace and other realms of the afterlife. These gender alterations, therefore, had to be included in an elite Egyptian woman's funeral equipment, particularly her coffin. This is from Gender Transformation and Death, a case study of coffins from Ramesside period Egypt by Kathleen M. Cooney. So where do we go? Well, if you're a woman, you got to go and become a man to make it to heaven.
Bars.
Yeah, and where's that misogyny he's talking about, right? You can't even make it into the afterlife unless you masculinize yourself. I don't even know what the right word there would be. Right. Yeah, but again, I think these dudes spend so much time trying to, bash Christianity that they really don't think through their own worldview. They really don't think about how they would defend against stuff like that. Like he would have to defend that. Explain to us why a woman has to become a man in order to enter the afterlife. Explain to us why Hatshepsut had to depict herself with a beard in order to be the ruler of Egypt. Explain to us why, later generations, a generation or so after Hatshepsut, they wanted to get rid of her memory essentially and tear down, get into the iconoclasm that we talked about. You got to explain those kind of things. If we're the misogynists, then we shouldn't see anything like that in your tradition, should we?
And remember, it's the elite women. It's the elite Egyptian women.
Right.
There's women with some bread.
Right. And you still got to be a dude.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Come on, man. That's what I'm saying.
Guess who in the middle of this just called me? Who just now called me?
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Sonetta?
They're
probably watching.
No. Guess what he wanted, Adam? He wants your digits, bro.
Part 2.
He wants your number.
Let's go.
You mind if I send it to him?
Absolutely. No, go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah. He's talking about Zion Lex wants to talk with you.
Oh,
yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
we're aware. We're aware.
Go ahead.
So not only is that crazy, right? It wasn't for everybody, because until the later part of this period, the non-royal deceased had limited access to an afterlife beyond the tomb. The ideological chasm between the king and his subjects was emphatically obvious. Only the king crossed the great divide and ascended to heaven. While kings enjoyed a smorgasbord of stellar, solar, and Osirian expectations in the royal netherworld, the elite were restricted to an earthbound eternity. Direct contact with the gods was the prerogative of the monarch, who acted as a guarantor of continued order, indicated in the change of seasons, the return of the inundation, and the movements of celestial bodies. The Old Kingdom's dissolution under centrifugal forces initiated a century of political disunity. In its ending, however, a crucial process was initiated. This involved the seepage of literacy and of ritual knowledge emanating from the highly influential elite stratum of Old Kingdom society into the provinces. This process activated the ideological developments in funeral beliefs. Whereas in earlier phases of the Old Kingdom, only the king could expect to enjoy immortality. The situation now changed from the emergence of a process now referred to as the demarcation of the afterlife. So when he talks about how, the Ten Commandments comes from the negative confessions, I mean, it's a book of spells that you need when you're dead, so you can cheat death and make sure your heart doesn't snitch. Oh, and by the way, if you're a female, you gotta become a male for this to work anyway. Oh, and by the way, this was really at first just for the king. And it wasn't until the collapse of that particular period of time that everybody else had a chance to make it. And lastly, common people had always been excluded from temple privileges and had always been exhorted to worship deities vicariously through the pharaoh. This is from In the Beginning, God, a fresh look at the case for original monotheism. So, but the gospel's for everyone. Immortality is given. We have been commissioned to tell everyone that immortality is there if you pledge allegiance to Jesus Christ. You don't need to be an elite. You don't need to change gender. You don't need to change your culture. You just need to, but you do need to change your heart. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's beautifully stated, man. I mean, and that's really, going back to this notion being made in the image of God. An element of that is, this idea that you are a member of God's royal family. You know what I'm saying? And you are a priest and representative in the earth. That's the idea there. It's not the case that only the Pharaoh is God's royal son or something like that. No, it's really the antithesis to that, actually. The idea is that everybody is part of that royal priesthood. Actually, I'm being called now by I guess you don't realize that we're live. Let me.
Well, we're about to wrap it up though, so don't.
Yeah. Well, one thing too that I wanted to it was funny how, there's all this contrasting that was constantly going on, and it was funny how at 112 minute mark, so I don't know what that translates to. He said that in fact, there are many who acknowledge that 8 of your 10 commandments seem to have come from the Kemetic text, by the way. And there are other sections of the biblical narrative that come from the Kemetic text. But then about 18 minutes later, he goes on to say, so I want you to understand that if this is your morality, a perfect God, you can take him and have him. I don't want him. how do you see a moral perfection when, quote, your laws are evil? There's evil. We don't even need to say the name of Satan. So I mean, it's crazy how all of these, there's all of these things that he's constantly going back and forth, and then all of a sudden, he just continuously cut himself in all of in his this whole conversation. I mean, it was. I just didn't understand if he really understood what he was saying about all this stuff. And like Kevin was saying, like, is this a genuine belief, or was this just something that he's sort of has invested in for so long that now he's sort of stuck? And I think that this is a key thing that we need to understand in apologetics, is that even though no matter how frustrating it is, like, we need to make sure that our hearts are in the perfect place, that when we run into these types of things, that we need to continuously make sure our motivations and our hearts are in that right place. But this is a perfect example, folks, of Vocab and Adam. And well, I mean, most of us here who are here, or all of us who are here on the panel, and those who are within the UA community, we want to make sure that we're not misrepresenting the opposite party, because this is what it looks like on their end. So if we're not ready, or if we don't have, or if we're purposely misrepresenting them, this is what it looks like. This is key, folks. So remember that when we're going in, and it's okay to admit you don't know. I know that I'm weak within the Kemetic understanding and all of these things. I know that I need to study more. This is basically my my trial by fire, because I've never had any real understanding of Kemeticism and the Kemetic thought and all those types of things. So I have the best teachers right now. So, but yeah, so.
Thank you, man. Definitely appreciate that.
I mean, that's on point, man. And just to follow it up, I mean, what are we doing this for, right? I mean, if we're not doing this to further the gospel, to draw people to Christ, then we're off, anyway. You know what I'm saying? And I think that, if I know that my ultimate goal is to preach the gospel, it doesn't do me any good to strawman you, because I'm not equipping. I'm not really engaging you at that point, and I'm also not, equipping my fellow believer to address what you actually believe. So either way, it doesn't do me any good to straw man. You know what I'm saying? But ultimately, if we have the right goal, then I think that puts us on the right path to engage in these things the way that we should in the first place.
Yeah, good stuff, man. And so we covered a lot of ground. I hope this just edified everybody in the chat, and also to give people courage that, if you can just ask great questions, that's part of having these conversations with people. It's not just, well, let me defend what I believe. No, people have to defend what they believe as well. Don't ever think that you always have to do the heavy lifting in these conversations. Because Adam and Vocab made it their business to make sure that he had to stand on his square, and you don't have to be this massive theologian to do that. You just need to listen and ask just good questions.
Yeah.
So,
exactly right.
Well, with that being said, gentlemen, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Yeah, man. I mean, I enjoyed doing this review, man. And I think for me, the most important thing was I wanted to get in there and preach the gospel. You know what I'm saying? I wanted to give the opportunity, and I think that we were able to do that. I wanted to really have Jabari defend his worldview, for the same reason that you just said. I mean, we're so used to being on the defense all the time, and we don't realize that good apologetics, if you're doing it right, is not just being on defense, but really challenging people to think through their own worldview. Right. And so I think that's something that we definitely wanted to do. And I think that at the end of the day, man, shout out to Vocab, shout out to Sinetta for having us on. Shout out to Jabari for even engaging with us. I thought that was really dope. But at the end of the day, man, I want Christians to be empowered. I want to see us equipped information wise and empowered and emboldened to go preach the gospel. You know what I'm saying? That's what we got to do. Go preach the gospel. That's what I'm trying to do, man. It's not about winning arguments. It's not about, hopping on somebody else's turf and shutting them down, all that kind of stuff. That's,
body bag.
Right. I mean, if people can watch URL for that, you know what I'm saying? If they want to watch battle rap, then they're not going to come to Vocab Malone and Adam Coleman for that. I'm saying what we're trying to do is preach the gospel. And I say it all the time, to be honest with you. And BK, you've heard me say this several times. That's my message. That is my constant message to the urban apologetics community. Let's get out and do the work. You know what I'm saying? Let's take this information. I mean, listen, like with the iconoclasm thing, if people have been watching BK Apologists, they know that Adam Coleman didn't just come up with that. These are, BK had 100,000 slides on that very issue. You know what I'm saying? I'm taking my notes as we're having dialogues and stuff like that. And it came in handy in this particular conversation. I was able to rattle it off my head because you and I had a conversation about that. That's what this is about. It's about learning from each other. It's about equipping each other so that we can then take this information and go out and preach the gospel and bear fruit. That's what this is about.
Amen. Good stuff, bro.
Yeah.
MJ, any final words?
At the end of the day, I mean, there's nothing for a Christian to be afraid of from folks who profess Kemet. I mean, we saw that brother, praying for brother Jabari. Okay,
Amen.
I believe he went home and thought about these things.
Absolutely, amen.
You can look when you get so many AR-15 holes shot through your worldview, you can't help but to go home and try to stop the bleeding. And think about these things. He got his worldview was under siege during that whole conversation. And what Brother Jabari was reduced to was filibustering and grandstanding.
Right.
Okay. So if you can, as a Christian, yeah, we might have to put up with somebody talking to us, asking us stupid questions. Have you ever seen it written on the wall? Pronounce such and such. Stupid
Where's the
questions.
T?
Like
Where's
that.
the T?
Where's the T? Vocab. Just dumb questions like that. I'm telling Christians to look past all of that false bravado, which is really what it is. False bravado. That's all it is. And once you pull the curtain back, the emperor has no clothes. But shout out to Adam Coleman sticking his nose where it didn't belong that day in the chat. Shout out to Vocab for being one of the most controversial. I love doing lives with Vocab because what if Jabari would have gotten the live chat that day? Vocab lived for the live chats. But shout out to Vocab for putting on, being willing to take on the criticism, take on the attacks. These attacks are so horrible. To attack this brother's motives, to impugn his character is really horrible. And black people, as black people, even if we're not Christians, we should be willing to deal with arguments and not attack a person because of their skin color. So to speak.
Right.
So and once again, to piggyback on what Adam said, I've learned so much from both Adam in terms of worldview critiques and things like that, and also from BK in terms of all this wonderful information with iconoclasm. We probably could have went in a little bit more with the ba and the ka and how the noses being ripped off. Really did a number on the ka on the ba, which is the essence coming into the statue and things like that, which that also defeats the notion of these things being purely principles once again. But I mean, shout out to each of these brothers who bring something unique to this community, and we learn from each other. So
amen. Mr. Phil Fox.
Vocab Malone is no longer called Vocab Malone. He is called the Swiss Army knife of urban apologetics. No, for real.
Be European, and the name's got to be European, doesn't it? Not Swiss.
No, for real. I mean, just like MJ said, it's just the learning that's going on, and the constant cross-pollination between all these different ministries. It's humbling to be a part of it, and it's even more exciting to watch it. When I came to this whole community looking at Vocab basically introduced me to everybody here. And just seeing the growth within myself, and then the growth, fellowshipping with MJ and Adam and Vocab, and the rest of the entire UA, and how much more that we are all growing collectively and making and doing and putting in the work is what is really what's encouraging to me. So stuff like this, where it's got, of course, it's got its entertainment value, but there was so much embedded in there as far as how you conduct yourself as a debater, as a and thinking on the fly. I mean, oh my gosh, to be able to think on the fly like Vocab and Adam, it's astounding to me. So yeah, there's so much more to learn, and it's exciting, the road that we're going down. But yeah, just keep all of us in prayer, that we continue to grow, that there aren't these huge stumbling blocks in front of us, that the time is right, and our families continue to stay healthy. I mean, there's so much to pray about. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Good stuff. Vocab, final thoughts.
Well, I am really excited now that we got Sonetta hitting me to hit Adam. So, I mean, I talked to Adam before, and I think he probably remembers I specifically said, hopefully something like that will happen.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Yeah,
something like that will happen, right?
Yeah, he just called me, and while we were on there, I told him we was live, and so I asked him if I could hit him back in the morning. He said yes. So, we'll see what comes out of it, man. I'm with that.
I'm excited about that. That's awesome. So
that's dope, man. Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you.
Well,
this whole thing started with a butt whipping from Reggie, Adam Coleman.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm excited to see what the future is, because I like some of the guys I've seen, and I think some of you guys know the lay of the land in the sort of the Sonetta world better than I do. But I've seen Brother Reggie, I've seen Shaka Amos, I've seen a Real Black Atheist a little bit. What's the guy, Unk? What's
Brother Unk? Yeah. Uncle Cake, yeah.
And I've seen him, I've heard him here and there, whatever, and even Sonetta himself. But I've never really seen them do defensive apologetics for their worldviews.
Right.
And even our friend Garfield, who I like, and sometimes we have common cause with, I haven't seen a lot of defensive apologetics, defending, explaining, clarifying their own worldview. If your only place of strength is your polemics, and I'm not anti-polemic, meaning to criticize or critique another worldview, okay? If that's your only strength, then your strength is not in actually what you believe. It's not. But come on now. And one thing I like about Christianity, where you can say whatever you want, is we put it out there. We tell you the book. There's no secret mysteries. We're not a mystery cult. We don't do a bunch of different stuff behind closed doors that you guys don't know about. All you got to do is come in, and you'll see and you hear, and we write it in our books, and we have creeds. So it's right there for the world to see. To me, that's how it should be. We'll put it out, boom. It's not the curtain for the initiates, and we don't really, we say one thing here, but another thing there. No. And regardless of what people want to say and criticize Christianity and all this stuff, why don't you guys do that? All the folks that embrace some kind of black agnosticism or atheism, or it can be white, whatever, you guys are not wrong with Richard Carey or whoever it is. You do that. What's ultimate? Tell us what's ultimate. Is it material or is it mental? You tell us. Jabari is over here saying that even these things that are sort of spiritual, he actually said are matter. That's Joseph Smith stuff, where Joseph Smith is talking about, spirit is actually less refined matter.
That's a good point.
There's so much confusion, and notice it's just a little bit of poking, And there's all this like confusion and fog brought, you don't know this word or you're the wrong color. But even in the answers that were given, it's eye-opening. And so what I'm saying to the Christians, to you gentlemen right here, to the sisters in the chat, let's keep on doing that. You're going to get punched if you get in these arenas, and you'll get hit and you get knocked down. We can't fault people. No one's going to have a perfect showing. It's not about that. But you go out, you be faithful, and just keep at it and watch what happens. And we're on the cusp, we're on the verge, we're on the break of a sort of a new revolution in apologetics in these arenas. I really think so. I think you're seeing it. You're witnessing it. It has not been this way for a long time. These Hebrew Israelites have had their echo chambers. The Kemets have had their echo chambers, and they've just been taking pot shots at us nonstop. Now we're coming over no man's land and meeting them in their own trenches, and they don't like it. They don't like it. But you know what? The Lord could use that. The Lord could use that to shake them up and rattle them up, but to get them out of that false ideology.
That's right. That's right.
No one said it's going to be a comfortable process for anybody. But I just want to encourage you all, and I'm glad to be one little part of it. Praise God. And Adam, I hope the Clippers get swept. Amen.
Here we go.
Gotta end it that way. Well, they say that good offense can win games, but good defense wins championships.
That's good.
Right. So they need to learn defense if they're going to win anything in the long run. But I also would like to share my love for Adam and Vocab. These guys have both extended the right hand of fellowship to me. Vocab is the one that really inspired me to be focused on creating this YouTube channel. Adam was the one that reached out to me so I could be part of this Bantu Jabari debate, and he took a chance with me, and we've been rocking ever since, so I owe both of you guys so much when it comes to this, and I really appreciate you having that confidence in me. Cause you took a chance. Cause I could have crashed and burned and be like, oh man, let's not do that again. But so thank you so much, man.
But you didn't.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So okay.
Now he's starting trends and fads. Yeah. Bodega. Never heard of that.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah.
For real. You started a whole movement.
You really did. Yeah, you did.
For real.
I mean, I wasn't trying. It just, I just want,
See? Yeah.
I saw people. I wanted to do a Vocab, and Adam did for me. You know what I mean? It's like they took a chance for me. I got to take a chance on others, So
that's good.
I hear that.
So with that being said,
Rez, I'm coming for you.
Yeah, you got to get him, bro. You got to get him. All that propaganda nonsense. You got to get him. So with that being said, MJ Jackson, Adam Coleman, Mr. Phil Fox, Vocab, and BK signing off. Peace.